Chapter 6:16. When a Gu master ascends to an immortal, their aperture would become an immortal aperture. Compared to the immortal aperture was a qualitative improvement. It was like opening up a whole new world. The immortal apertures of rank 6 and 7 Gu immortals were often called blessed lands. The immortal apertures of rank 8 and 9 Gu immortals were called grotto heavens. After a Gu immortal dies, if they leave behind their obsession, the obsession will fuse with the heaven and earth power in the immortal aperture and form a land spirit. Every immortal aperture was unique. It was a part of the Gu immortal's body. In a sense, even if a Gu immortal died, the land spirit and immortal aperture they left behind were another form of continuation of their life. It was precisely because they were formed from obsessions that they were stubborn and inflexible. There were many examples in history. For example, a powerful Gu immortal covets a certain blessed land, but in the end, the land spirit would not allow it to recognize him as its owner, and the land spirit would not allow it. In the end, the land spirit would self-destruct, causing the Gu immortal's efforts to be in vain. Giant Sun's will had forcefully sealed the Frost Jade Peacock Imperial Court's earth spirit, causing the latter to be enraged for more than 100,000 years. Now that he had to continue sealing it, the Frost Jade Peacock's resolute heart was ignited. What the hell is going on? Lord Tai Bai Yunqing's immortal ascension caused a hole in the blessed land? Imperial Court blessed land is appearing in the world. Unbelievable. This has never happened in tens of thousands of years. This is bad. I have a very bad premonition. Do you think the blessed land is going to be destroyed? In the blessed land, everyone exclaimed in shock. Fear and doubt quickly spread. Countless wounds appeared in the sky. The heavenly wall of the blessed land that was originally alternating between gold and silver. Right now they were covered in wounds, and from these wounds, people could see the starlight in northern plains night sky. Feng Yuan's gaze. However, there was still silence. Imperial Court blessed land will not self-destruct so easily, he muttered in his heart. He was very certain of this. In history, there were many examples of land spirits committing suicide and blessed land self-destructing, but this was definitely not the case before him. How could the arrangements of the Giant Sun Immortal be so easily overturned? This was the great effort of a rank 9 Gu Immortal, directly covering northern plains. The 88-point Jinyang Tower was the biggest obstacle. In the past, how could a land spirit create such a wave? But now Giant Sun's will had just awakened from its slumber and was caught unprepared. For the time being, he couldn't spare any effort to clean up the situation. And under the influence of my gruel mud immortal Gu, the sealing power of the land spirit has dissipated by more than half. That is why the land spirit has the strength to struggle. Analyzing until here, Feng Yuan could not help but praise Giant Sun's will's decisiveness and methods. He cleverly used Tai Bai Yunqing as a chess piece, using the only means at his disposal. He had fought for the most precious time, allowing the scales of victory to tilt in his favor. Although the land spirit cannot truly self-destruct, it can still extract its own heaven and earth qi. This is the most basic ability. With that thought in mind, Feng Yuan looked into the distance at Tai Bai Yunqing. Above Tai Bai Yunqing's head, the tribulation clouds that had already dissipated gathered again. The dust on the ground. Similarly, it began to spread again. Large amounts of heaven and earth qi gushed out. A brand new heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity were about to form. What is going on? Why are there still heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities? Haven't they passed already? Yi Luisang's eyes opened wide at this sight. This is completely different from the records. Tai Bai Yunqing is very strange. How can there be two heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities in a row? He Lulan was also puzzled. They did not know, the others were even more clueless. Seeing the imposing heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities forming again, many people cried out in shock, expressing extreme worry towards Tai Bai Yunqing's situation. Tai Bai Yunqing's expression was ashen. Why are there still heavenly tribulations forming? That's not what my inheritance says. His heart was filled with both shock and anger, because not only in the outside world at the same time, inside his immortal aperture, another heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity was brewing. Mortal Gu becoming an immortal was like a Gu master becoming an immortal. It was a dangerous process of defying heaven and earth. When a goo worm refines into an immortal goo, it would naturally draw in heaven and earth chi, thus forming the corresponding heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. With both internal and external problems attacking together, Tai Bai Yunsheng was in a dilemma. He was afraid of losing sight of the other. The situation was very worrying. Fang Yuan used gruel mud immortal goo to awaken the land spirit. Tai Bai Yunsheng's immortal ascension became a crucial chess piece in the contest between the land spirit and Giant Sun's will. This immortal ascension was already out of the control of the people involved. Other than Fang Yuan, everyone else was kept in the dark. They were muddle-headed and did not know the truth. Only Fang Yuan knew the land spirit's plan. The land spirit could not win against Giant Sun's will in a race for time, so it placed its attention on Tai Bai Yunsheng. Heaven and earth chi were extracted by the land spirit by sacrificing its own foundation. Its goal was to form a heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity to destroy Tai Bai Yunsheng. What benefits would destroying him bring to the land spirit? This involved the annexation of the immortal aperture. Mortal apertures could not annex each other. But after immortal ascension, the immortal aperture would become a small world. Between the heavens and earth they could annex each other, which was even more beneficial to the Gu immortal. Earlier on Tianti Mountain, Fang Yuan had given up a quarter of Hu immortal blessed land's territory, which was quickly seized by other Gu immortals. Annexing other immortal apertures to strengthen one's own immortal aperture had many benefits. If the land spirit destroyed Tai Bai Yunsheng, the latter would die, but his immortal aperture would remain. After the immortal aperture was left behind, it would naturally be annexed by Imperial Court Blessed Land. After this annexation, the Blessed Land's foundation would rise greatly, and the land spirit's strength would also rise sharply. This would be a huge help to it in breaking through Giant Sun's blockade. In the sky, black clouds rumbled. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Countless purple lightning bolts converged into a ball of lightning. On the ground, the calamity dust in the sky settled down, exposing the bare ground. A crack gradually appeared on the ground. It was hundreds of feet long, revealing bright red flames inside, like a desolate beast opening its bloody mouth. Flames rose up, condensed into smoke and surged up. Chaotic lightning ball. Restraining smoke. Fang Yuan frowned slightly. This chaotic lightning ball was not only powerful, it also had the effect of destroying the Gu Master's thoughts and wills, causing chaos. The smoke sealed the world. As long as the Gu Master was trapped inside, they would lose their five senses, like falling into a maze, unable to struggle free. The chaotic lightning ball was not fast, but when used with restraining smoke it was just right and its might could be maximized. Fang Yuan could not help but feel slightly worried. Tai Bai Yunsheng's failure. This was not what Fang Yuan wanted to see. The hand holding the glass owner token tightened slightly. Fang Yuan's gaze was deep. Still too weak. Too weak. With my current strength I can only make use of the situation. Howl, howl, howl. The chaotic lightning balls tore through the air, emitting a strange screeching sound. It sounded like a woman's crying voice. It was extremely piercing. At the same time, the smoke surged, climbing towards Tai Bai Yunsheng. Tai Bai Yunsheng's expression was pale. The chaotic lightning ball's direction kept changing, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right. It was not easy to dodge. Right now, there was smoke rising around him, as if he was in an ancient forest. Once I enter the smoke, I will definitely die. Oh no, the immortal aperture's heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity are also brewing. My defensive goo has already been used up. Tai Bai Yunsheng gritted his teeth. Ruthlessness shone in his gaze. Fight! His whole body shone with a bright light. Several movement goo worms were activated, bringing his body flying upwards. The intense wind blew this old man's hair behind his head, causing it to flutter in the wind. A burst of exclamations erupted from the crowd. Tai Bai Yunsheng directly charged towards the tribulation cloud. Above his head were countless chaotic lightning balls. Looking from afar, it was like moths flying into a flame. Is Tai Bai Yunsheng trying to commit suicide? Yi Luisang frowned. Good. He Lulan praised. Fang Yuan's eyes shone. The smoke seemed harmless and had no offensive ability. It only had the effect of trapping the enemy. But its threat was even greater than the chaotic lightning balls. Tai Bai Yunsheng recognized the situation and made the best decision. He charged into the lightning cloud, and under the bombardment of the countless lightning balls, he moved like a fish in water. Bam bam bam. The lightning balls continued to explode, but it did not affect Tai Baiyunqing's body. He moved left and right, searching for a way out. His movement speed fluctuated between fast and slow, but it was always just right. Amazing! What kind of flying standard is this? To think that Lord Tai Baiyunqing is actually a flying master. He hid it too deeply, I only found out now. Everyone was pleasantly surprised to find that Tai Baiyunqing was actually a flying master. To think that Tai Baiyunqing is also proficient in cloud path gu worms. Yi Luisang praised, he was not very surprised. Tai Baiyunqing was a healing gu master. He had traveled in northern plains all these years, and had encountered countless dangers. To be able to survive until today, he definitely had some skill. In fact, most healing gu masters were not proficient in defense but in movement. When gu masters were being nurtured, they were specially trained like this. Because on the battlefield, healing gu masters were often the first targets, and most of the time, they could not receive the help of their teammates. This required the healing gu master to have a certain level of self-defense. As the number one healing master in Northern Plains, Tai Baiyunqing is not proficient in defense, and he is so old, it is not surprising that he has such flying attainment. He Lulan thought of this and turned her head, looking at the sky far away. There, Feng Yuan was sitting on the Azure Wolf King's back, seemingly paying attention to Tai Baiyunqing. Compared to Tai Baiyunqing, Chang Shanin, who was also a flying master, was much younger. Little sparrow, you are jumping around quite happily. In Truyang Building, giant suns will laughed from extreme anger. 88-point Jinyang Tower shook intensely, multicolored light filled the sky, and a huge light pillar shot out. Immortal Gu. Divert Disaster. The light of Divert Disaster shone on Tai Baiyunqing's surroundings, dispelling the lightning balls and piercing through the smoke. Ancestor is really favoring Tai Baiyunqing. He is making a move again. Exclamations of admiration and jealousy rose one after another. This situation is too strange. Tai Baiyunqing is not of Giant Sun's bloodline, but he is actually receiving ancestors' favor. Someone started to be suspicious. Chapter 617. Luck Inspection Gu. Feng Yuan's heart jolted. He poured his primeval essence into it. At the next moment his vision changed. Luck Inspection Gu was a rank 5 luck path investigative Gu. It could allow him to see luck invisible to the naked eye. At this moment, looking at Tai Baiyunqing's luck, the originally flourishing red fire luck had dissipated by a small half. Earlier, giant sun immortals will helped him, causing his luck to be depleted. Now, it is helping him again, causing his luck to be reduced to a third of its original value. Feng Yuan thought. He looked at his own luck. It was still black coffin luck. It was as thick as ink and was even larger than before. Feng Yuan's heart shook. He sneered to himself and looked at the Blessed Land's people. Almost everyone who was watching Tai Baiyunqing's immortal ascension had their luck changed. Most of the Gu masters had unknowingly been shrouded in a layer of small black coffin luck. Only He Lulan still had green luck. Looking around, Feng Yuan felt his eyes hurting. He wisely stopped using luck inspection Gu. During the process of a Gu master's immortal ascension, heaven and earth chi would boil. Using Gu worms in such an environment would definitely cause backlash. If he persisted, both the human and Gu would be injured or even die. As his vision returned to normal, Feng Yuan looked at Tai Baiyunqing again. He was moving between the lightning bolts, passing through the gaps in the clouds, displaying his master-level flying attainment. He had no defensive Gu on him. He was purely moving to avoid the chaotic lightning balls. It was like walking on a tightrope. It was extremely dangerous. To avoid the earthly calamities restraining smoke, he had charged into the lightning clouds. This was a wise choice, but it was also a helpless move. If not for my green grape immortal essence, I would have turned into unlimited primeval essence. Otherwise, my aperture would have already been exhausted at this insane speed. Tai Baiyunqing breathed roughly. His hair was in a mess, his body was weak. The situation was getting more and more dangerous. Buzz! Suddenly, a chaotic lightning ball changed its direction, smashing towards him. Tai Baiyunqing wanted to dodge, but it was already too late. For a moment he could only stare angrily. At the critical moment, A white beam of light shot over. It hit the chaotic thunderball. Under the illumination of the light, the ball of lightning quickly melted and turned into a puff of pure and clear air. Divert disaster goo. The rescue at 88-point Jinyang Tower had once again helped Tai Bai Yunsheng. So close, even though I became a goo immortal, I have no defenses. If you're struck by the chaotic thunderball, you'll definitely be injured. The consequences are unthinkable. Tai Bai Yunsheng swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Fear lingered in his heart. After becoming a goo immortal, his life essence had been elevated. If it was immortal, a single chaotic lightning ball would be enough to take their life. Goo immortals were not afraid, even if they had no defensive goo worms. However, it was not a problem for him to endure a dozen or so thunderballs. However, the key point was that the chaotic thunderball had special effects. After being hit, Tai Bai Yunsheng's thoughts would be in chaos. His thoughts would be in chaos and he would not be able to think. At this crucial moment, if Tai Bai Yunsheng floated in the air, countless chaotic thunderballs would rush towards him. If he was hit by these thunderballs, Tai Bai Yunsheng would not even have the ability to think. He would be bombarded and drowned by the countless thunderballs. Quickly look. 88-point Jinyang Tower has saved Tai Bai Yunsheng once again. That's right, this situation has already happened at least a dozen times. With True Yang Tower's help, it seems Tai Bai Yunsheng's success in passing the tribulation is certain. Outside the arena, everyone was amazed and envious at this scene. Such a huge reinforcement, can it really work? He Lolan's eyes shined with brilliance, but she had a different opinion in her heart. In this environment where heaven and earth chi were boiling, any goo worm that was used would attract a strong backlash. Divert Disaster Immortal Goo was no exception. In the history of goo masters, there were many cases of using immortal goo to help during tribulation, but the backlash eventually destroyed the immortal goo. It was just that most people were amateurs, they did not know such secrets. Divert Disaster Immortal Goo is one of the cornerstones of 88-point Jinyang Tower. It is used to divert disaster for Imperial Court Blessed Land. Without it, Imperial Court Blessed Land would face a terrifying heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. Giant Suns would absolutely not sacrifice this precious immortal goo for Tai Bai Yunsheng. That is to say, Giant Sun's will support is limited. Next is the most crucial part. Everything depends on whether Tai Bai Yunsheng can quickly pass the immortal aperture's calamity and tribulation. Feng Yuan was expressionless as he sat on the Azure Wolf King's back, his heart also starting to throb. After all, landscape as before goo was his main target in this trip to Northern Plains. Tai Bai Yunsheng's speed gradually slowed down. He had internal and external problems. The external problem was the land spirit scheme, while the internal problem was the mortal goo ascending to a mortal realm, causing calamities and tribulations in his immortal aperture. Especially this internal problem, it was drawing more and more of his attention, causing his reaction to the outside world to slow down. Suddenly, his body shook and he completely stopped moving. At the next moment, countless chaotic lightning balls smashed towards him. Divert Disaster Light Pillar shined with a dazzling light. It also exploded and enveloped Tai Bai Yunsheng. The most crucial moment has arrived. Feng Yuan, He Lulan, Yi Luisang and the others could clearly see this. Their gazes flashed. At this moment in Tai Bai Yunsheng's immortal aperture, a dazzling light burst out, filling the sky and earth. The aura of the immortal goo burst out majestically. In the dazzling light, an immortal goo slowly rose up. It was shaped like a ladybug, fist-sized and had a jade-like body. There were natural markings on its round shell. Half were rivers and lakes, while the other half were hills and peaks. So this immortal goo is formed from the combination of river as before and mountain as before. It seems its effect is the combination and enhancement of river as before and mountain as before. Tai Bai Yunsheng guessed. This was refined using heaven and earth resonance. He did not personally refine it, thus he was not clear about the effect of landscape as before. After observing for a few breaths of time, Tai Bai Yunsheng shifted his attention to the center of the blessed land. Immortal goo landscape as before was not his target, it was only a pleasant surprise. At this moment, at the center of the blessed land, the cocoon formed by man as before goo also had cracks on it. Dazzling multicolored light flowed out of the cracks, breaking out of the cocoon and becoming a butterfly. The cocoon dissipated. A multicolored butterfly flew gracefully. Everywhere it went, a multicolored rainbow light would scatter along the butterfly's path. The shape of the rainbow was like a twisting phantom. Success, immortal Gu Man as before. Ah! Seeing this, Tai Bai Yunsheng cried tears of joy. He raised his head and laughed maniacally. So many years of accumulation, so many worries and expectations, so many times his life was hanging by a thread. At this moment he obtained the perfect result. But the internal problems were still there. In the immortal aperture, green tribulation clouds rumbled, forming into a huge green-scaled snake. The snake had a rotten silver horn on its head, and its body was hundreds of meters long. The snake tail turned into chi, becoming one with the tribulation clouds that covered the sky. The ground started to shake, rumbling like thunder. The deafening sound was deafening. The newly formed ground started to crack. Lava gushed out of the cracks and thick smoke rose. 10,000 li of dry land. Heavenly tribulation, silver horn green scale python, earthly calamity, molten earth. Tai Bai Yunqing's heart shook. Facing the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity alone, he felt an unparalleled pressure. He placed his hope on the immortal Gu landscape as before. Come. He willed, and a bead of green grape immortal essence flew out, fusing into landscape as before Gu. The ladybug-like landscape as before Gu immediately spread its wings, turning into a flash of light as it flew away. Everywhere it went. In a radius of 10,000 li, the earth returned to spring. The mountains and rivers were like before, returning to the moment before the earthly calamity. Good Gu, good Gu. Tai Bai Yunqing's heart immediately calmed down. With landscape as before immortal Gu, he had no fear of the molten earth calamity. Howl! The silver horn green scale python opened its mouth, letting out a strange roar. It suddenly shot out, its huge body bringing along tornadoes as it pounced towards landscape as before immortal Gu. Tai Bai Yunsheng suddenly became nervous. Immortal Gu had their own abilities. Except for defensive Gu, they were all weak. Landscape as before Gu was the same. If it was destroyed by the silver horn green scale python, the situation would be very disadvantageous to Tai Bai Yunsheng. Fortunately, landscape as before Gu resonated with heaven and earth. It was born in his immortal aperture, and could be controlled by him like an extension of his arm. Tai Bai Yunsheng had accumulated a lot. He quickly activated landscape as before immortal Gu and escaped. Behind him, the silver horn green scale python attacked dozens of times, causing mountains and rivers to collapse. The earth to crack, sand and rocks were sent flying, and intense winds were created. Oh no! This goes on. Tai Bai Yunsheng's mind was extremely concentrated. After a few breaths of time, his forehead was already covered in sweat. His eyes were shut. His body was still floating in the air, allowing the chaotic lightning balls to attack him. Fortunately, he had Divert Disaster Immortal Gu's light pillar to protect his body. Although Tai Bai Yunsheng could not care about the outside world, he had not forgotten about the external threat. The terrible situation prompted him to make a decisive decision to cut off his wrists. The reinforcements at 88 Point Jinyang Tower are limited. Who knows when they will stop? I can only do this man as before immortal Gu is in my hands now. As long as there is time, there is hope. Cut, cut. Tai Bai Yunsheng screamed in his heart. Giving up a pawn to save the general, he resolutely gave up a portion of his immortal aperture, and started to cut the sky. The blessed land was the foundation of a Gu immortal. Cutting the blessed land was the same as harming oneself, reducing one's strength and potential. But Tai Bai Yunsheng had no choice but to do this. Like when Feng Yuan underwent the earthly calamity in Hu immortal blessed land, in order to get rid of the blue charm lightning shadow, he gave up a quarter of the blessed land. Tai Bai Yunsheng was also making a decisive decision. The sky of the immortal aperture was cut layer by layer. Along with the thick tribulation clouds, they were directly expelled from his body. Outside his body was Imperial Court Blessed Land. Frost Jade Peacock chirped happily, immediately devouring these blessed land fragments to increase its strength. Giant Suns will roared in anger. He was protecting Tai Bai Yunsheng's life now, but the latter was supporting the enemy. Giant Suns will had no choice but to protect him. If Tai Bai Yunsheng died, his entire immortal aperture would be annexed by Imperial Court Blessed Land. And most importantly, Divert Disaster Immortal Gu was already full of cracks. If it continued to support Tai Bai Yunsheng, it might be destroyed by the backlash. Divert Disaster Immortal Gu was one of the cornerstones of 88-point Jinyang Tower. It could not be lost. But if Tai Bai Yunsheng died, it would also be disadvantageous to Giant Sun's will. Chapter 6:18. Inside the Immortal Aperture, the sky was being shaved off layer by layer. The thick tribulation clouds were becoming thinner. The rampaging silver horn green scale python was now only 1/10 of its original size. Its might was even weaker. The situation was turning for the better for Tai Bai Yunsheng. Success is close at hand. Tai Bai Yunsheng's eyes were filled with tears as he opened them. The situation inside the Immortal Aperture was gradually stabilizing. He could already divert some of his attention to deal with the dangers outside. Seeing that he was enveloped by the light of Divert Disaster and could not be affected by the tribulation, Tai Bai Yunsheng could not help but feel gratitude. This time it is all thanks to 88-point Jinyang Tower's help, otherwise, I would not have even a trace of hope of success. Ugh! The light of Divert Disaster suddenly vanished. The pitiful Tai Bai Yunsheng was caught off guard. He was hit by the chaotic lightning balls that swarmed towards him. His thoughts were in chaos as he flew around, crashing into large numbers of chaotic lightning balls along the way, losing control of himself and losing his rationality. Before everyone could express their shock, the 88 Truyang building once again erupted with an extremely powerful suction force, directly sucking the frenzied Tai Bai Yunsheng inside. Giant Sun's will could not sacrifice Divert Disaster Gu. Nor could he kill Tai Bai Yunsheng. Of course, the best method was to expel Tai Bai Yunsheng from the Blessed Land. Unfortunately, in the current situation, only Frost Jade Peacock could do this. Left with no choice, Giant Sun's will could only use this method. This was indeed a bad plan. Under everyone's shocked gazes, tribulation clouds and earthly calamity moved, covering 88-point Jinyang Tower. Countless chaotic lightning balls rained down like a storm. The restraining smoke coiled around the tower like an immemorial python. It continued to seep in. After 88-point Jinyang Tower absorbed Tai Bai Yunsheng, it became the target of the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. To protect Tai Bai Yunsheng's life, Giant Sun's will chose to resist the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. How can this be? Lord Tai Bai Yunsheng was sucked into Truyang Tower. What ability does he have? Worthy of the ancestors' favor? This is a heavenly tribulation. It will cause great damage to the Truyang building. Everyone was dumbfounded and exclaimed in surprise. Under the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity, activating Gu worms would result in backlash. 88-point Jinyang Tower was a rank 8 immortal Gu house. It was essentially the combination of many immortal Gu and countless mortal Gu. Now, he was forcefully resisting the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. The pressure itself was immense. And because of the backlash, it affected the coordination between the Gu worms. There was no doubt that this was not a wise move. However, Tai Bai Yunsheng had become the key to the battle between Giant Sun's will and Frost Jade Peacock. Giant Sun's will had no choice but to resort to this method. In the 88-point Jinyang Tower, the Frost Jade Peacock was flying at an extremely fast speed, constantly dodging between the towering trees. A total of 5 immortal Gu. It dragged behind it a trail of colorful flames. They surrounded and intercepted it. The Frost Jade Peacock didn't want to be sealed again, so it fled with all its might. Gradually, it became so flustered that it didn't know where it was going, knocking down countless giant trees along the way. The Truyang building was controlled by Giant Sun's will. It was a natural cage that could mobilize any strength in the round. Frost Jade Peacock became a caged bird, and the giant trees turned into tree men, opening their arms to block it. Squeak! Frost Jade Peacock suddenly screeched. It received a huge blow. It tore apart the defense of the 3 ancient tree men, but its speed fell greatly because of this. A metal path immortal Gu behind it caught up. A layer of golden light quickly spread out from its body. Wherever the golden light went, it condensed into a thick golden shell, firmly covering Frost Jade Peacock's body. Frost Jade Peacock only felt that the areas covered by the golden light could not move at all. It was immediately shocked and furious. It quickly flapped its wings, trying to raise its speed again. But at the next moment, it suffered the attack of a second immortal Gu. An intense drowsiness assaulted its mind. causing its eyes to blur as it felt a strong sense of drowsiness. Bang! A loud sound echoed. It fell from the sky and fell head first to the ground, unable to fly again. It had a premonition of its fate of being sealed again, and tears of grief and indignation flowed out of its eyes. Don't even think about it. Don't even think about it, Frost Jade Peacock muttered, trying to resist with all its remaining strength. But although it still had the power of immortal Goo Gruel Mud, the two immortal goo that sealed it were not restrained by immortal Goo Gruel Mud. Even if I die, I won't let you have your way. Frost Jade Peacock burst out with an intense will to die, disregarding everything. It extracted the foundation of Imperial Court Blessed Land, Heaven and Earth Chi, to intensify the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. As for it, it was rapidly weakening. Imperial Court Blessed Land was originally created by a spacepath goo immortal. Thus the Blessed Land's area was huge, far surpassing its peers. Later, after Giant Sun Immortal's development, it became a top-tier Blessed Land, possessing astronomical changes. It could be said that it was already one step away from transforming into a grotto heaven. If it could annex the time path goo immortal Tai by Yunqing's immortal aperture, space and time would converge. It would be a huge supplement to Imperial Court Blessed Land. It was very likely to undergo a qualitative change and raise Imperial Court Blessed Land to a grotto heaven. In this way, Frost Jade Peacock would be able to destroy most of Giant Sun Immortal's arrangements. Although it could not suppress 88-point Jinyang Tower, it had the ability to sweep it away. But Giant Sun's will was too decisive. He would rather endure the attacks of the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity to protect Tai Bai Yunqing's life. Frost Jade Peacock was only a remnant obsession of a dead goo immortal. How could it scheme against Giant Sun's will? But it was also because of this obsession that it had a sense of bravery and bravery. When it was sealed, it would rather be destroyed, disregarding the consequences. It extracted a large amount of heaven and earth chi from Imperial Court Blessed Land. This heaven and earth chi was like adding fuel to the fire, adding to the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity, causing lightning to flash and thunder to rumble in the sky. The number of chaotic lightning balls instantly increased by 10 times. Restraint Smoke also underwent a new transformation. Its body expanded and became even darker. Crack, crack, crack. Lightning balls rained down like a storm, fiercely smashing onto 88-point Jinyang Tower. Amidst the intense explosions, 88-point Jinyang Tower was riddled with damage. The eaves were broken and cracks appeared on the outer walls. Restraint Smoke turned into an even more troublesome life-taking smoke calamity. Its power was even greater, and the smoke pervaded every opening. It permeated into 88-point Jinyang Tower, gradually dyeing its surface black. The pitch-black walls looked like they had been eroded by thousands of years of wind. They continued to peel off. The heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity are getting stronger. This power is too terrifying. Quickly retreat, retreat. What's going on? Even the wind and snow outside the Blessed Land are pouring in. The spectators were all shouting in shock. Frost Jade Peacock extracted a large amount of heaven and earth chi, damaging the foundation of Imperial Court Blessed Land. For example, Imperial Court Blessed Land was originally a sturdy house. But now, the bricks and walls were all extracted. Only the supporting frame of the house was left. This way, countless loopholes were formed. It was connected to the outside world. Meanwhile, the outside world, Northern Plains, was currently experiencing the 10-year snow calamity. Divert Disaster Goo's hibernation caused Imperial Court Blessed Land to be attacked by the snow calamity. Imperial Court Blessed Land was no longer a shelter. Large amounts of wind and snow poured in. The temperature fell rapidly. Large snowflakes fluttered in the air. Although it had not reached the level of forming snow monsters, it was not far from it. Little Sparrow, look at the trouble you have caused. Giant Suns will shouted angrily. Blessed lands and grotto heavens, every once in a while, they would welcome calamities and tribulations of varying sizes. The greater the fortune, the stronger the calamity and tribulation. The great snow calamity that ravaged Northern Plains every 10 years was actually Imperial Court Blessed Land's calamity and tribulation. Within Imperial Court Blessed Land, there was 88 Truyong Building. It was also a top-grade Blessed Land with such a huge area. The fortune was too great, thus the calamities and tribulations it attracted were also extremely terrifying. Now that Divert Disaster Gu was hibernating, Imperial Court Blessed Land could communicate with the outside world, causing the 10-year snow calamity to return. 88-point Jinyang Tower could resist the lightning balls and black smoke, but it could not resist the great snow calamity that ravaged the whole of northern plains. If this situation continued, Imperial Court Blessed Land would crumble under the impact of the snow calamity. Frost Jade Peacock did not need 88-point Jinyang Tower, but 88-point Jinyang Tower needed Imperial Court Blessed Land. However, there was only one way to salvage the situation. That was to activate Divert Disaster Gu and eliminate the heavenly calamity and earthly calamity, turning it into heaven and earth chi. Then, Imperial Court Blessed Land could absorb the heaven and earth chi to stabilize its foundation and close itself off from northern plains. Giant Sun's Will could take a risk and barely activate Divert Disaster Gu. But to make Imperial Court Blessed Land absorb heaven and earth chi, Frost Jade Peacock had to cooperate. To make this little sparrow cooperate, it is simply a fantasy. Even Giant Sun's Will knew the difficulty. He helplessly thought of the only possibility, unless Frost Jade Peacock recognizes a new master. What Giant Sun's Will did not know was that in Tai Bai Yunqing's immortal aperture, there was landscape as before immortal Gu that could easily resolve this problem. He was thinking of another immortal Gu that he had, false emotion fake will Gu. The condition for Frost Jade Peacock to recognize a master was a pair of lovers who truly loved each other. However, nothing was absolute. The land spirit could not be deceived. Giant Sun's Will knew that as long as he found two candidates and used false emotion fake will Gu, he could deceive the land spirit and make Frost Jade Peacock recognize him again. With Frost Jade Peacock under his control again, all the problems could be resolved. Moreover, this method was very beneficial to Giant Sun's Will. If he found two lovers who truly loved each other and became the owner of Imperial Court Blessed Land, what if this pair of lovers did not obey Giant Sun's Will's orders? By finding two unrelated people and using false emotion fake will Gu to fulfill the master recognition condition, Giant Sun's Will would have the initiative. Because false emotion fake will Gu contained Giant Sun's Will. False emotion fake will Gu was controlled by Giant Sun's Will. Even if these two unrelated people became disloyal in the future, as long as the false emotion fake will Gu was still in his hands, at worst, Giant Sun's Will could just choose two new people. Little Sparrow, you are still far from being able to fight me. Giant Sun's Will was astute and far-sighted. He had inherited some of the main body's wisdom. The seemingly desperate situation could not stump him. With just a little thought, he thought of a solution. He immediately mobilized the strength of 88-point Jinyang Tower and began to inspect the candidates. At this moment in Imperial Court Blessed Land, everyone was fleeing for their lives. There were many casualties. The environment was rapidly worsening. The wind was bone-chilling. Even a spit could instantly freeze into ice. Majestic snow poured down. Tall and fierce snow monsters stood up from the depths of the snow, looking to devour people. But this could not stump Giant Sun's Will. 88-point Jinyang Tower could plunder the resources of the whole of northern plains. Not to mention the two people in front of him. These two people naturally had to have Giant Sun's bloodline. Soon, Giant Sun's Will selected two satisfactory candidates. Hei Lolan's vision suddenly changed. Even though she was rank 5 peak stage, she did not even have the ability to resist. She was forcefully sucked in by Truyang Tower. Ah, save me! Not far away, Ma Hongyun was still frantically fleeing. He did not notice the changes in his surroundings. Bam! He crashed into the trunk of a huge tree in front of him. Feels like this kid ran with his eyes closed. Hei Lulan was speechless. Chapter 619. So painful, so painful. Ma Hongyun held his red forehead, grinning as he crawled up from the ground. What is this place? He discovered that the heavy snow had disappeared. The surroundings were warm like spring. It was not a world of ice and snow, but a vast ancient forest. Beside him, there was a huge ancient tree that was hundreds of meters tall, so thick that even a dozen grown men holding hands could not wrap around it. The ancient trees reached the sky, the lush leaves covered the sky. The bright sunlight seeped through the gaps of the leaves, forming a peaceful shade. Compared to the outside world, this was like a paradise. You are now in 88-point Jinyang Tower. A voice suddenly resounded in Ma Hongyun and Hei Lolan's ears. Who is it? He Lulan's pupils shrunk. Ma Hongyun shouted in shock, Ghost! He panicked and subconsciously ran to He Lulan's side. Ghost? I am not a ghost. If I could become a ghost, it would be much easier to do things. Unfortunately, I am only a will left behind by the main body. I am not even comparable to a ghost. Giant Sun's will sighed. Golden sand-like light particles suddenly appeared in the air. These light particles rotated and suddenly condensed into a majestic figure. It was the appearance of Giant Sun Immortal. Ah, you are? Ma Hongyun stammered, pointing at Giant Sun's will. He was extremely shocked. He Lulan's pupils shrunk. He was after all the leader of He tribe. He knew a lot. His expression was solemn. He placed his hand on his chest and bowed. Junior greets ancestor Giant Sun. Giant Sun's will sighed again, saying, I know the two of you are filled with questions. Long story short, not long ago, this person barged into Truyang Tower and unsealed the land spirit Frost Jade Peacock. This caused Imperial Court Blessed Land to be in danger. As he said this, the golden sand light particles condensed into Chang Shanyin's image. Ah, it's Wolf Wangda's man. Ma Hongyun immediately recognized him. It's him. He Lulan couldn't help but exclaim. But Giant Sun's will continued. What you see is not this person's true appearance. Saying so, Chang Shanyin's image in the air gradually changed, eventually turning into Fang Yuan's original appearance. This is the true face of this person, Giant Sun's will said. Fang Yuan was impersonating Chang Shanyin. He used the human skin goo. This goo was a mortal goo. It could deceive He Lulan and the others, but it could not deceive the immortal Venerable's will. Even when Fang Yuan was in the true inheritance secret realm, Giant Sun's will entered a deep slumber. But in 88-point Jinyang Tower, there were many goo worms that recorded his image. After seeing Fang Yuan's true face, He Lulan and Ma Hongyun couldn't recognize him anymore. So this Chang Shanyin is an imposter. They actually dared to invade Imperial Court Blessed Land. He Lulan snorted coldly. Sensing the thick smell of a scheme, she was shocked and furious. Not only is he daring, he is also well prepared. From the two methods he used to plot against me, this is not something a single person can do. He definitely has a huge force behind him. You are all my bloodline descendants. Truyang Building was plotted against by outsiders, and is in deep danger. I need your strength now. Giant Sun's will said. He Lulan and Ma Hongyun looked at each other. They expressed their willingness to cooperate with Giant Sun's will. Giant Sun's will's words were simple. In a short while, he explained everything clearly. So that's it. He Lulan came to a realization, finally understanding why Truyang Building would help Tai Bai Yunsheng. His heart was pounding. Giant Sun's will wanted him to become one of the owners of Imperial Court Blessed Land. The benefits involved were too shocking. Imperial Court Blessed Land has a very special condition to recognize a master. There are 2 blessed land owners. No wonder back then, Giant Sun Immortal wanted to set up a sacred palace for the Divine Empress to stay in. He doted on the Divine Empress a lot, and now it seems that the Divine Empress is the female lead of Imperial Court Blessed Land. Using false emotion fake Wu Gu can deceive the land spirit. This is very good. But this kid, what ability does he have to be chosen by ancestor Giant Sun to become the Blessed Land's owner on par with me? He Lulan's gaze was bright, looking at Ma Hongyun with deep disdain. Don't tell me, ancestor Giant Sun thinks he is easier to control? Thinking of this, He Lulan's gaze shook. Afraid of Giant Sun's will, she did not dare to let her imagination run wild. Different from He Lulan, Ma Hongyun suddenly thought of something and shouted, Wait! Lady Xiaoyun and Lady Xiaoli are still outside. I don't want to be the Blessed Land's owner. I need to go out and save them. Lady Xiaoyun was naturally Zhao Lianyun, and Lady Xiaoli was Chong Li. Back then, in order to win over Mingjia, Chong Biao married his adopted daughter Chong Li to Ma Hongyun. Thus Chong Li was Ma Hongyun's wife. Giant Sons will seem to think highly of Ma Hongyun, laughing heartily. Ha ha ha, tender feelings for the fairer sex, as expected of my Giant Son's descendant. Kid, as long as you become the owner of Imperial Court, this will be your territory. At that time, you can arrange as many women as you want. Ma Hongyun was stunned before stubbornly shouting, No, it is so dangerous outside now, I need to save the 2 of them first. No matter what it is, we will talk about it later. Let me out quickly. Foolish kid, with your strength it will be hard for you to protect yourself. How can you protect others? Giant sons will laugh heartily. Just stay here obediently and cooperate with me to become Imperial Court Blessed Land's owner. I'll save your woman. Giant sons will was swift and decisive. The moment he finished speaking, he made his move. Large numbers of Gu masters were drawn into Truyong building. Almost all of them had Giant Sun's bloodline. These were his descendants. The reason why 88-point Jinyang Tower was set up was to benefit his descendants. Of course, Giant Sons will did not save these descendants who did not have Gu master aptitude. Feng Yuan saw all of this. Giant Sons will made his move again. This time, many people were drawn into the tower. Mo Yao's will said in his mind. Feng Yuan was still sitting on the Azure Wolf King's back, floating in the air and looking at the sacred palace far away. But this place was already thousands of li away from his original location. The calamities and tribulations were getting more and more terrifying. Feng Yuan could only retreat again and again to avoid them. Around the sacred palace, the heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities continued to intensify. It was already extremely dangerous. Frost Jade Peacock's move was too drastic. Even the power of Northern Plains' great blizzard of 10 years was attracted here. Right now, the sacred palace was mostly destroyed. Broken walls were flying around in the wind. It was no longer as majestic and glorious as before. 88-point Jinyang Tower's situation was worrying. It was surrounded by the heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities. The inner layer was chaotic lightning balls and restraining smoke, while the outer layer was a fierce blizzard that was getting thicker and thicker. Giant Sun's will has already awakened. He wants you dead. It is already a good thing that he did not target you. He will definitely not come to save us. We should retreat and go back to take Water Pavilion. Water Pavilion has a lot of immortal essence that I left behind back then. It can be used by itself. Go back to Central Continent and return Water Pavilion to Spirit Affinity House. The benefits you will obtain will surpass your imagination. Why take the risk here? In his mind, Mo Yao continued to persuade. The situation had reached this point. The whole of Imperial Court Blessed Land was affected. Giant Sun's will had awakened. Water Pavilion could no longer hide. It was a good chance to retreat now while Truyong building was busy with itself and suppressed by the heavenly tribulations. Retreat. Feng Yuan's gaze was cold. He looked at the glass owner token in his hand and sneered. This glass owner token was tightly gripped by him. This was a heavy trump card. He had not used it yet. Central Continent's Gu Immortals had left behind 3 methods to deal with Giant Sun's will. The first was the special Wu Gu formation. It was specially used to deal with Giant Sun's will. The second was the sealing Gu formation. It could temporarily seal the yellow apricot immortal essence that Giant Sun Immortal had left behind. The third method was more concealed and had greater power. It could temporarily pull Giant Sun's will out of Truyong building. The glass owner token was the key to activating these 3 methods. Right now, the first 2 methods had been used, only the third method was left. But this third method was much stronger than the first 2. It could be considered a trump card. Especially now. 88-point Jinyang Tower was surrounded by the heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities. Once Giant Sun's will was pulled out of the tower, he would definitely suffer from the terrifying attacks of the heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities. Mo Yao's words were indeed wise and prudent, but how could one gain a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? At the same time, inside Truyong building, Chong Li and Zhao Lianyun were pulled into the tower by Giant Sun's will, appearing in front of Ma Hongyun out of thin air. Lady Xiaoyun, Lady Xiaoli. Ma Hongyun was overjoyed as he flew towards them. Husband. Chong Li was surprised and happy as she escaped danger, directly throwing herself into Ma Hongyun's embrace. Zhao Lianyun also quickly walked to Ma Hongyun's side, her face filled with the joy of surviving a desperate situation. She lightly kicked Ma Hongyun. Silly boy, to think there would be a time when you were useful. Ha ha ha, that is only natural. Ma Hongyun let go of her, sincerely looking at Giant Sun's will in the air, thanking. Thank you, old ancestor. Just as he said that, an intense tremor could be felt. At once, the whole forest was shaking. What's going on? Chong Li and Zhao Lianyun turned pale. Alright, don't talk nonsense, the heavenly tribulations are getting heavier. If this continues, Even 88-point Jinyang Tower will not be able to withstand it. You need to become the owner of Imperial Court Blessed Land as soon as possible. Hurry up and do this. Giant Sun's Will's expression changed as he spoke. Bam bam bam. A group of tall tree men slowly walked over. Each footstep was like the rumbling of thunder. The tree ants bent down and opened their lush palms, revealing the giant peacock that was unable to move. This is Imperial Court Blessed Land's land spirit, Frost Jade Peacock. Giant Sun's Will introduced. At the same time, false emotion fake Wugu slowly flew towards Frost Jade Peacock. Chapter 620. Listen to my instructions. Hold your breath. Remain calm. Be at ease. Don't let your thoughts run wild. Giant Sun's Will instructed in a leisurely tone. He Lulan slowly closed her eyes, relaxing her breathing. Zhao Lianyun and Chongli watched from the side, not daring to make a sound. A light breeze blew, the leaves rustled, creating a tranquil atmosphere. Ma Hongyun looked left and right, suddenly seeing the Frost Jade Peacock. He shouted in surprise. Look, this peacock is alive, it is crying. The tranquil atmosphere was suddenly destroyed. Giant Sun's Will's voice stopped. He Lulan endured her irritation, angrily opening her eyes and scolding. Nonsense, of course the land spirit is alive. If the land spirit dies, it means the blessed land is finished. Who cares if it is crying or not, just do as I say. Oh, so it was like this. I was wrong. Ma Hongyun was frightened by the angry black tyrant, quickly nodding his head in agreement. Calm your mind, get rid of all distracting thoughts, don't think too much about anything. Only like this can you display false emotion fake Wugu's power better. Giant Sun's Will continue to instruct. He Lulan closed her eyes, her breathing became lighter. A light breeze blew, bringing along the fragrance of plants. Wait a minute. Ma Hongyun suddenly shouted. You brat, you are courting death. He Lulan clenched her fists, a huge anger rising in her chest. She was flustered and exasperated. Old ancestor, I am a man, he is also a man. You want me to have feelings for a man, I cannot accept it. Ma Hongyun was afraid of He Lulan's might. He muttered in a low voice, cautiously guarding against He Lulan while pleading with Giant Sun's Will. Disgraceful thing. He Lulan gritted her teeth. Her fists were clenched so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. Her eyes shone with an ominous light. If not for Giant Sun's Will being beside him, with his violent nature, he would have already punched and exploded Ma Hongyun's head. Idiot! The most important thing now is to save the blessed land, to salvage the situation. So what if you are a man? It's okay to be a little more carefree. I support you. Zhao Lianyun immediately shouted. She was worried that He Lulan would make things difficult for her. At the same time, there was an indescribable excitement in her eyes. That's right, my husband. Everything is more important than anything else. I don't mind. Chongli also whispered in agreement. Ma Hongyun rolled his eyes and shouted, Hey, it's easy for you to say that. Ancestor, I've thought of an idea. Why don't my wife and I do it? We are sincere, we can even save you the false emotion fake Wugu. Ma Hongyun was simple and honest. He didn't think of the complicated relationship between them. To Giant Sun's Will, it was impossible not to use false emotion fake Wugu. He Lulan's killing intent surged. Ma Hongyun's suggestion greatly harmed his interests. His anger was at its peak, but with Giant Sun's Will present, he did not dare to act out. As expected, Giant Sun's Will rejected Ma Hongyun's suggestion. Lad, you are still too young. Is true love so easy to find? In the face of a disaster, they fly away separately. Couples in the mortal world are often like this. Do you think your wife truly loves you? Giant Sun's Will's words made Chongli's face turn pale. Indeed, Chongli had never truly loved Ma Hongyun. Initially, she was sent to Ma tribe as a political bargaining chip by Chong Biao, with the intention of befriending Ma Yingjie. But later on, Chong Biao died. Chongli lost her backer and could only resign herself to fate, staying by Ma Hongyun's side. Fortunately, Ma Hongyun had reached rank 3. He became Ma tribe's acting elder. His assets were no longer the same as before. He was also deeply trusted by Ma Yingjie and could afford to raise Chongli. Ma Hongyun would become one of the owners of Imperial Court Blessed Land. Giant Sun's Will had already started investigating Chongli and Zhao Lianyun, who had a close relationship with him. His method of investigation was simple, direct, and effective. He directly sent a portion of his will into Chongli and Zhao Lianyun's minds, flipping through their memories and thoughts. With the advantage of true yang building and the help of an immortal venerable, Chongli and Zhao Lianyun could not sense that their secrets were being rapidly exposed by Giant Sun's will. Old ancestor, what do you mean? Ma Hongyun frowned. He was foolish and daring. He Lulan did not dare to offend Giant Sun's will, but he dared to directly question him. Giant Sun's Will laughed. You are indeed an idiot, lad. Never mind, it is understandable that your mind is not working fast. I will give you a lesson now. This wife of yours has an ulterior motive for getting close to you. She was purposely sent here by her foster father. Even when you saved the damsel in distress back then, it was merely a show. Chongli's face turned pale, her body trembled. He Lulan was unmoved. He was already used to such dirty political tricks. How could that be? Ma Hongyun's eyes widened. He did not believe it. Giant Sun's Will continued. There is also this little female companion of yours. She is called Zhao Lianyun. She is somewhat intelligent. She had no choice but to accompany you. She was forced by the situation. In the depths of her heart, she did not even like you. She was only using you to protect herself. Of course, now that you have become stronger, she has already started to rely on you. Zhao Lianyun's heart turned cold. The feeling of having her thoughts seen through was extremely uncomfortable. It was as if the clothes she was wearing had been ripped off by someone. But facing Giant Sun's Will, she did not dare to refute. She was not an ordinary child. She was a transmigrator. The hardships of her fate made her realize the mysteriousness and cruelty of this world. At this moment, Giant Sun's Will suddenly paused. The will image in the air opened its eyes wide, revealing an expression of shock and anger. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Giant Sun's Will's tone changed. He stared at Zhao Lianyun with eyes filled with disgust, scaring Zhao Lianyun into retreating a few steps. You are actually an otherworldly demon. You are actually hiding beside Ma Hongyun. You truly have guts, you truly have guts. But a pity you met me. Giant Sun's Will revealed a dense killing intent. Otherworldly demon, what is that? He Lulan was shocked with his knowledge. It was the first time he had heard of such a term. He looked at Zhao Lianyun, but could not see anything extraordinary about her. Old ancestor, what are you trying to do? Even if Ma Hongyun was stupid, he could still sense that something was wrong. He quickly ran in front of Zhao Lianyun, opening his arms, protecting her behind him. Brat, you want to protect an otherworldly demon? Giant Sun's Will raised his voice, his expression becoming cold. What otherworldly demon? I don't know what otherworldly demon, I only know she is Lady Xiaoyun. Without her help, I might have already been beaten to death. Ma Hongyun defended Zhao Lianyun with all his might. Giant Sun's Will shook his head, snickering. He disdained to explain, but for some reason he had to explain. Beaten to death? Brat, you are destined to become a Gu immortal. She will not help you. There will definitely be other people, other things that will help you. Otherworldly demons are the enemies of the whole world. They are a huge threat. If they are allowed to grow, the consequences will be unthinkable. There was once an otherworldly demon. When he matured, he almost destroyed the 5 regions. He Lulan stared with wide eyes. Giant Sun's Will's words. It was truly too sensational. From his words, it sounded like an otherworldly demon was in existence that could rival rank 9 venerables. How was this possible? But the person who said this was someone that He Lulan had no choice but to believe. At once, He Lulan's gaze towards Zhao Lianyun was filled with killing intent. No, Lady Xiaoyun is innocent, you cannot harm her. Ma Hongyun persisted in his opinion. He wholeheartedly wanted to protect Zhao Lianyun. Zhao Lianyun was stunned. She looked at Ma Hongyun's lonely figure, her eyes glistening with tears. She did not know what bullshit otherworldly demon was, but she had already guessed that it had something to do with her transmigration. She forcefully wiped away her tears, her lips curling into a resolute arc. Since Ma Hongyun wholeheartedly wanted to protect her, she could not implicate Ma Hongyun because of this. She took a step forward, standing in front of Ma Hongyun, raising her head to face Giant Sun's Will in the air. her tone firm. If you want to take my life, come and take it. Good. Giant Sun's Will laughed malevolently, his killing intent surging. There was no trace of sympathy. He was an enormous will formed from the special will goo. The difference between special will and other wills was, the goo master would give it a special action, and this action would be triggered when a specific situation was satisfied. And this Giant Sun's will, when it was formed, had been given a deep meaning by the main body. When it discovered the otherworldly demon, regardless of the situation, killing the otherworldly demon was the most important task. Giant Sun's Will had to kill Zhao Lianyun. It was already praiseworthy for him to be able to endure until now. No! Ma Hongyun saw that the situation was bad and shouted. In a moment of desperation, he stretched out his arms and hugged Zhao Lianyun in his embrace. Otherworldly demon, your death is not to be regretted. Giant Sun's Will sneered and was about to attack. But the next moment, his expression froze and he roared towards the sky. Damn it! The angry roar suddenly stopped, and the will's influence in the air suddenly disappeared. Giant Sun's Will only felt a strong and irresistible force dragging him outside 88-point Jinyang Tower. What happened? What happened? Be it He Lulan or Ma Hongyun, they were both stunned on the spot, not expecting this to happen. Just a moment ago, Giant Sun's Will was so powerful. Why did it suddenly disappear? Outside 88-point Jinyang Tower, the golden sand-like majestic will envelop the whole of True Yang Tower. Rumble! A vast number of chaotic lightning balls exploded one after another. Chaotic lightning balls could cause people to fall into chaos, and in essence they targeted thoughts and wills. Giant Sun's Will was countered by the chaotic lightning balls, and was immediately battered by the explosions. Large amounts of his body parts flew everywhere. Meanwhile, the restraining smoke was hitting him while he was down, swallowing pieces of Giant Sun's Will. Giant Sun's Will was truly too majestic. The outer layer of his will was being devoured by the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity, while the inner layer was desperately trying to drill into the tower. 88-point Jinyang Tower was originally controlled by Giant Sun's Will, but now it was an empty tower. Although the skeleton was still there, many goo worms inside had stopped working. It was like thousands of soldiers suddenly losing their commander. They could only rely on their instincts and habits. At this moment, 88-point Jinyang Tower was extremely fragile. Chapter 621. And I'm going to kill you. Giant Sun's Will was furious after being ambushed again. It immediately sent out a majestic current of will towards Fang Yuan, who was far away. However, this current of will was washed away by the chaotic lightning balls and restraining smoke in the inner layer. It had shrunk by 30%. After being whittled away by the outer layer's blizzard, it had shrunk by another 20%. By the time it reached Fang Yuan, it had already shrunk by more than half. At this level, I can only maintain it for less than 15 minutes. Fang Yuan ignored the incoming attack. His mind was calm as he silently estimated the duration of the third method. He gripped the glass owner token tightly, and with a thought, he appeared in 88 True Yang building in a flash. This was the power of the glass abode master token. Earlier, when Fang Yuan explored 88-point Jinyang Tower, he had relied on this to secretly teleport, keeping everyone in the dark. At the next moment, he appeared in an icy mountain, causing the current of will to miss. The world was white, the bone-chilling wind blew on his face. Roar, roar, roar. Three-eyed snow rabbits that were as tall as humans with bulging muscles drilled out from the depths of the snowy ground, and in a short period of time, they surrounded Fang Yuan. This was naturally one of the checkpoints in 88-point Jinyang Tower, and Tai Bai Yunsheng was here. The number of snow rabbits increased. Soon there were tens of thousands of them, and they glared at Fang Yuan. In terms of close combat ability, these snow rabbits were not inferior to wind wolves or turtleback wolves. In a world of ice and snow, their combat strength even surpassed that of an ordinary wolf pack. They had large numbers of wild goo on their bodies. They were even more ferocious. To break through their obstruction, one would need to expend a lot of energy, as well as a lot of time. But Fang Yuan had the glass owner token. He did not need to force his way through. With a thought, the glass abode master token flashed with a faint light. The snow rabbits showed a confused expression. their killing intent dissipating. With a wave of Fang Yuan's hand, they scattered and burrowed into the thick snow, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Using the glass owner token, Fang Yuan could control many floors of the Truyang building. He had purposely held back. He didn't control all of them, so there were still some spots left. Now that he had used it, he could immediately turn this barrier into his own. Without the hindrance of Giant Sun's will, he smoothly became the true controller of this checkpoint. Dispersing these snow rabbits was naturally an easy task. Gotcha! The glacier cracked open, revealing a hole. The hole extended downwards, all the way into the iceberg. Fang Yuan entered the cave and ran quickly. Soon he saw Tai Baiyunsheng. Tai Baiyunsheng's hair was as white as snow. He was sealed in a block of ice and seemed to be in a deep slumber. Motionless. During his tribulation, he was struck by the chaotic lightning ball and fell into a state of chaos, unable to think. Thus, Giant Sun's will easily sucked him into the building. Tai Baiyunsheng did not have Giant Sun's bloodline and was also a Gu immortal. He was not easy to control. In order to prevent him from causing trouble, Giant Sun's will seize the time to deal with the land spirit. Thus, he took the chance to seal him here. Fang Yuan will, the ice broke and Tai Baiyunsheng slowly woke up. Changshanin. Tai Baiyunsheng gradually regained his senses. He looked around and recalled staring at Fang Yuan. Even though he had always been disgusted by Fang Yuan's ruthless actions, he showed gratitude at this moment. You saved me? Fang Yuan smiled proudly. If I did not save you, who else could it be? Tai Baiyunsheng, do you know that you are facing a great calamity? Your death tribulation is upon you. A great calamity? My death tribulation is upon me? Tai Baiyunsheng's expression changed. This famous person was not scared by Fang Yuan's frightening words. Instead, he slowly stood up and smiled at Fang Yuan. I would like to hear the details. Fang Yuan looked at Tai Baiyunsheng with resentment, explaining, I received master's orders to infiltrate Truyang building and release the land spirit seal, intending to overthrow Truyang building and take control of Imperial Court blessed land. Master also gave me the glass owner token to use 3 methods to deal with Giant Sun's will. But along the way, you suddenly ascended to an immortal, and Giant Sun's will borrowed your strength to weaken the land spirit, leading to this dangerous situation. You think you are favored by Giant Sun's will? Humph. He is only using you to protect Truyang building. Now you have already lost your value and are sealed. If I did not save you, you would have fallen into Giant Sun's will's hands, unable to live or die. What? Tai Baiyunsheng frowned, revealing a bewildered expression. Fang Yuan's words, not only was there a lot of information, it was also very impactful. Tai Baiyunsheng stared at Fang Yuan, his eyes flickering with uncertainty, his frown becoming deeper and deeper. I was wondering why I suddenly received the help of Giant Sun's will. After being sucked into Truyang building, I was sealed for no reason. According to what you said, everything can be explained. But who exactly are you? Why did you save me? Although you released my seal, it does not mean that I will unconditionally believe your words. Fang Yuan raised his head and laughed. Who am I? Open your eyes wide and see clearly. Saying that, he took a step back, and in front of Tai Baiyunsheng, he took out a knife and slowly cut his forehead. A line of blood followed the edge of the knife, extending all the way to his abdomen. What are you doing? Tai Baiyunsheng was shocked. Fang Yuan laughed lightly, holding the knife in a reverse grip. He aimed at the back of his head and cut downwards, his 2 hands holding the knife alternately, cutting a wound. 2 long wounds quickly oozed out scarlet blood. Intense pain came, but Fang Yuan's expression did not change. Next, he cut wounds of all sizes on his arms, thighs and other crucial areas. Throughout the process, his wrist was as steady as a mountain rock, his expression indifferent, as if he was cutting someone else and not himself, not feeling any pain. What are you doing? Tai Baiyunsheng shivered inwardly, taking a step back, suspicion rising in his heart. But the next moment, his pupils shrunk. The shock on his face could no longer be concealed. He saw Fang Yuan clenching his teeth, first stripping off his clothes, then his skin. His movements were clean and efficient. There was not an inch of skin left on his body, only bright red tendons were left. Like a blood monster, his white gums were exposed, looking extremely horrifying. Next, Fang Yuan activated his healing goo worm. Bathing in a jade-green light, his whole body quickly grew new tender skin. The skin gradually covered his whole body, and when the green light dissipated, what appeared in front of Tai Bai Yunsheng was Fang Yuan's true appearance. Ah, so you are not Chang Shanin. You are pretending to be him. Who exactly are you? Although Tai Bai Yunsheng was benevolent, he was not stupid. When he saw this scene, he immediately understood the truth. He felt even more fear in his heart. The Fang Yuan in front of him, although only an ordinary-looking young man, had an extraordinary aura, especially his eyes that were like an ancient lake, deep and unfathomable. His whole body emitted a dense rank 5 peak stage aura. His gaze was sharp like a blade. Tai Bai Yunsheng had seen countless people. With one look, he could tell that Fang Yuan was a proud person with a firm will, a genius who did not fear any challenge. Such a person, Tai Bai Yunsheng had only seen a few in his entire life. Who am I? Fang Yuan smiled lightly, his lips curling into a trace of arrogance, his expression lively. His gaze was bright. Looking at Tai Bai Yunsheng, his tone was solemn. His words were filled with sincerity that made people subconsciously believe him. My real name is Fang Yuan. I came from Central Continent to Northern Plains with an important master's order. We are from the same sect. Fang Yuan? The same master and disciple? Bo. Astonished shock and astonishment filled his heart. Bo continuously attacked Tai Bai Yunsheng's mind. What do you mean? We are from the same sect. You still don't understand? It means that your master and I are the same person. Our relationship is that of senior and junior brothers. Fang Yuan frowned, his tone showing some impatience. There was no language barrier between Tai Bai Yunsheng and Fang Yuan. He naturally understood. It was just that he could not comprehend the significance of this at the moment. When he heard Fang Yuan's explanation, a figure appeared in his mind. It was an old beggar. He had a head of purple-red messy hair. At times he was crazy, at times he was unconscious. But when he was awake, the old beggar's gaze was like the sea. His aura was intimidating. When he was young, Tai Bai Yunsheng kindly gave the old beggar a bowl of water to drink. When the old beggar woke up, he gave him 3 Gu immortal true inheritances to choose from. In the end, the young Tai Bai Yunsheng chose the 3rd true inheritance. This was the deepest impression in Tai Bai Yunsheng's memory. He could not forget it for the rest of his life. For many days and nights, he would always think of the old beggar's figure. He was the one who saved the confused Tai Bai Yunsheng, pulling Tai Bai Yunsheng up from the bottom. It could be said that the old beggar created Tai Bai Yunsheng. Without the old beggar's help, there would not be the current Tai Bai Yunsheng. Master, Tai Bai Yunsheng muttered. All along, he had treated the old beggar as his supreme master. His body could not help but tremble. He had tried to investigate the old beggar's whereabouts, and had never stopped trying. But so many years had passed, he had almost traveled all over Northern Plains, but there was no progress. The old beggar was mysterious, appearing suddenly and disappearing mysteriously. Now when Tai Bai Yunsheng suddenly heard news about his master, he was filled with excitement, joy, and even more disbelief. Now listen carefully. Fang Yuan pointed at Tai Bai Yunsheng. His tone was not polite. Master's name is Zishan Makoto. He has 6 disciples. I, Fang Yuan, am the 5th. I cultivate strength path and enslavement path. Both paths are Gu immortal true inheritances. Zishan Makoto. Tai Bai Yunsheng was like a treasure. He chewed on the name Fang Yuan fabricated out of thin air. The old beggar's messy purple hair appeared in his mind. Master usually does not care about his appearance. He likes to travel the world and explore secrets. Before I came to Northern Plains, I heard him talk about you. He once gave you 3 choices, but you chose the most useless time path inheritance. If it were me, I would definitely choose the first one. That fire path inheritance is the inheritance of Burning Sea Heavenly Immortal. It has astonishing power. Fang Yuan's tone was filled with anger, yearning, and regret. His expression was sincere and lively, as if such a thing really happened. Tai Bai Yunsheng heard this and his heart shook. He had never mentioned this experience to anyone. But Fang Yuan spoke with certainty. He actually accurately described the situation back then. He naturally did not know that Fang Yuan had once searched his soul to confirm if he had the immortal recipe of landscape as before Gu. Then you are my senior brother? Tai Bai Yunxing looked at Fang Yuan. His gaze had already changed greatly. Fang Yuan curled his lips in dissatisfaction. You can barely be considered an in-name disciple. Master actually has many. You cannot be compared to a direct disciple like me. But according to the rules of the sect, as long as an in-name disciple succeeds in immortal ascension, he will be promoted to a direct disciple. According to the ranking, you are now my that fifth senior brother. Oh, Tai Bai Yunxing slightly raised his brows. What are you so proud of? You are only ranked ahead of me because of your Gu immortal status. Fang Yuan coldly looked at Tai Bai Yunxing. Wait until I become a Gu immortal. I cultivate both enslavement and strength path. After I defeat you, I will become your fifth senior brother. Of course, looking at your old appearance, you don't have much lifespan left. Maybe I don't even need to become an immortal. I can just wait for you to die of old age. Fang Yuan's tone and attitude were extremely impolite, and even carried obvious hatred. This was where his brilliance lay. If he was allowed to speak with passion, if he raised his hand to swear, Tai Bai Yunxing might not believe him. But it was precisely because of this rejection and conflict that made Tai Bai Yunxing relax his vigilance and gradually choose to believe him. Although Tai Bai Yunxing was quite old, compared to Fang Yuan who had 500 years of experience, he paled in comparison. Fang Yuan did not give a direct explanation. But with just a few words, Tai Bai Yunxing understood the whole story and saw a corner of the sect. Tai Bai Yunxing pondered. Then sixth junior brother. Fang Yuan immediately stretched out his hand. Don't call me that, I am not familiar with you. My mission was originally going well. You messed it up. Do you know how much time Master spent to make the arrangements in Imperial Court Blessed Land? Now it turned out like this. How am I going to explain this to Master when I return? Just call me Fang Yuan. Tai Bai Yunxing was powerlessly interrupted by Fang Yuan and could not get angry. Instead he felt a sense of guilt. He chuckled and cupped his fists towards Fang Yuan, sincerely asking for guidance. Then, Fang Yuan, now that things have come to this, how can I help you to recoup the sect's losses? Success. Splendid, truly splendid, lad. You are truly sinister, tsk. With just a few words, you swindled a Gu immortal's battle strength. Mo Yao had been observing from the side, but at this moment, she could not help but appear in Fang Yuan's mind, praising Fang Yuan's performance endlessly. Fang Yuan sneered inwardly, but on the surface he said unhappily, after talking for so long, Tai Bai Yunxing, you finally said something sensible. Master's eyes are not wrong. He did not nurture an ingrate. Knowing kindness and repaying it is the role model of our generation. The situation is terrible now, and most importantly, we do not have much time left. I have already used the 3 methods Master left behind. You need to cooperate with me. Now we can only rely on the 2 of us. Please instruct me. Tai Bai Yunxing bowed again. First use this. Fang Yuan grinned, throwing out the 15-year lifespan Gu. This is. Tai Bai Yunxing looked at this lifespan Gu and his expression changed, revealing a shocked expression. Use it, you might have immortal Gu man as before, but that thing consumes a lot of immortal essence. I don't want you to suddenly die of old age at the crucial moment. Fang Yuan's tone was vicious, his expression cold. But Tai Bai Yunxing felt a sense of warmth. In the 500 years of Fang Yuan's previous life, he had gone through many trials and tribulations. His grasp of people's hearts had reached the peak. This lifespan Gu, the glass owner token in my hand, can control a portion of the round. There is only one lifespan Gu in Truyang building. Quickly use it, don't dawdle. But Tai Bai Yunxing did not use it in the end, instead keeping it in his pocket. He thought of Gao Yang and Zhu Zai. Even now he was still feeling guilty. The lifespan Gu in his hand seemed to have that familiar smell of blood. What's wrong with you? Fang Yuan was furious, pretending he did not know anything. There are some reasons. Tai Bai Yunxing's eyelids drooped before raising his gaze, firmly looking at Fang Yuan. Anyway, don't worry, I will provide you with the greatest help. Fang Yuan stared fixedly at Tai Bai Yunxing, gritting his teeth. Scoundrel, do you know I did not hesitate to use the glass owner token to get this lifespan Gu? Tai Bai-Yunsheng was silent. His gaze was gentle like jade, but filled with determination. Fang Yuan's words made him feel even more warmth in his heart. The last trace of suspicion also vanished. After looking at each other for a while, Fang Yuan seemed to feel Tai Bai-Yunsheng's determination, retracting his gaze. Humph, if you were not a Gu immortal and a personal disciple, I would not care about your life or death. All right, according to the contents of your true inheritance, and your performance in the tribulation, you should have the immortal Gu landscape as before, right? Yes. Tai Bai-Yunsheng nodded yes. Fang Yuan's eyes brightened. He opened his mouth, revealing his snow-white teeth, not concealing his joy. Very good, follow me. Saying so, a large group of starlight firefly Gu flew out of his aperture. Oh right, hold these two for me. Put them in your immortal aperture. I can't bring them. I can't bring it. Fang Yuan casually tossed it. Immortal Gu. Tai Bai-Yunsheng's pupil shrunk. Chapter 622. Master, you are finally back. Little Hu Immortal had been waiting at the Stargate for a long time. After seeing Fang Yuan's figure, she immediately jumped in front of him and hugged his thigh, using her cute apple-like face to rub against him. It has been hard on you these days when I was not around. Fang Yuan's face showed a gentle smile. He stretched out his hand and lightly stroked Little Hu Immortal's small head. Little Hu Immortal's pair of fox ears immediately trembled, her face showing a happy expression, a snow-white foxtail lightly swaying behind her small butt. This is the land spirit? That means this is a blessed land. Tai Bai-Yunsheng followed closely and stepped out of the Stargate. After seeing Little Hu Immortal, he could not help but be shocked. He had heard Little Hu Immortal calling Fang Yuan master. Fang Yuan was only a mortal, but he already possessed a blessed land. There were also people in history who had such a fortuitous encounter. The most famous one was Giant Sun Immortal. When he was still a mortal, he was lucky enough to inherit Imperial Court Blessed Land. After that, Imperial Court Blessed Land gave Giant Sun Immortal a huge help in his cultivation. Haha! The Central Continent Blessed Land is called Hu Immortal Blessed Land. I received Master's orders and forcefully seized it from several Central Continent sections. Fang Yuan replied with a proud expression. Immediately, Tai Bai-Yunsheng's gaze changed again. Immortals and mortals were different, but now he was truly looking at Fang Yuan as an equal. He could not help but ask, thinking about it, the process of seizing this blessed land must have been very dangerous, right? Of course, thinking about it now, I still have some lingering fear. Fang Yuan laughed heartily. But speaking of which, the winner takes all. Everything is that simple. I obtained the blessed land and became the final victor. The greater the risk, the greater the benefits. Tai Bai-Yunsheng nodded, sighing in his heart. This benefit was huge. A blessed land with a land spirit was the immortal aperture of a dead Gu immortal. Possessing such a blessed land was equivalent to inheriting the Gu immortal's immortal aperture and continuing to cultivate. Meanwhile, Tai Bai-Yunsheng's impression of Fang Yuan's adventurous character deepened. Master, who is he? Little Hu Immortal saw Tai Bai-Yunsheng and sensed the Gu immortal aura overflowing from his body. She couldn't help but tighten her grip on Fang Yuan's pants, appearing somewhat nervous and alert. Don't worry, he's one of us. You are here to help us save Danghun Mountain. Fang Yuan comforted Little Fox Immortal. Quickly bring us to Danghun Mountain. When Little Fox Immortal heard this, her eyes lit up. She believed her master's words without reservation. Therefore, he immediately let down his guard and let Fang Yuan and Tai Bai-Yunsheng. Together they disappeared. In the next moment, Fang Yuan and Tai Bai-Yunsheng were teleported to the center of the blessed land and saw Danghun Mountain. Danghun Mountain had already been mixed and corroded to the point that it was unbearable to look at. The once towering Danghun Mountain was now reduced to a small mound. Previously in Danghun Mountain, the Danghun Palace that was created was naturally destroyed long ago. Master, if you were any later, you wouldn't have been able to see Danghun Mountain. Little Hu Immortal's tone was sorrowful. Fang Yuan lightly stroked her small head and turned to look at Tai Bai-Yunsheng. Tai Bai-Yunsheng was a smart person. Seeing this scene and recalling Fang Yuan's words, he guessed Fang Yuan's intention in inviting him. He nodded towards Fang Yuan and took out landscape as before Gu from his aperture. Immediately, The aura of the immortal Gu filled the surrounding space. This is. Little Hu Immortal stared with her watery eyes. This was the first time she saw landscape as before Gu. This Gu was like a ladybug, fist-sized and jade-like all over its body. There were natural patterns on its round shell. Half of the patterns were long and winding, depicting rivers and lakes, while the other half was steep and overlapping, depicting hills and peaks. Tai Bai Yunsheng lightly shouted, and a bead of green grape immortal essence turned into a ray of light and entered landscape as before Gu in the blink of an eye. The immortal Gu suddenly burst out with a jade-like radiance that shot up to the sky, causing people to be unable to look at it directly. The radiance enveloped the damaged Danghun Mountain. Gruel mud on the surface of Danghun Mountain immediately calmed down under the jade light. The power of immortal Gu gruel mud was quickly neutralized until it disappeared. The jade light gradually dimmed and Tai Bai Yunsheng threw in a second bead of green grape immortal essence. The jade light regained its strength and covered the damaged Danghun Mountain, continuously cleansing it. The small mound of Danghun Mountain, under the nourishment of the radiance, grew taller and stronger at a visible speed. Danghun Mountain is back. Little Hu Immortal clapped her small hands and laughed happily. But good times did not last long. Danghun Mountain only recovered 20% before the jade light weakened again. Tai Bai Yunsheng's expression changed slightly. What mountain is this? It actually consumes so much green grape immortal essence. When he became an immortal, he had produced 36 beads of green grape immortal essence. But after that, he used his movement Gu and dodged the chaotic lightning balls, expending one bead. In his own immortal aperture, he resisted the heavenly tribulations and earthly calamities that formed after the formation of the immortal Gu, and used landscape as before Gu to restore his immortal aperture to its original state, expending a total of 3 beads. Tai Bai Yunsheng was very clear about the preciousness of immortal essence. Now that he had just restored Danghun Mountain, he had already expended 2 beads of immortal essence. Looking at this situation, he would need to expend at least 5 to 6 beads of green grape immortal essence. Fang Yuan smiled. Danghun Mountain? Danghun Mountain? Tai Bai Yunsheng finally heard it clearly and his expression changed, his eyes widening as he said in shock, could it be? In the legends of Ranzu, could there be a second Danghun Mountain? Fang Yuan's smile deepened. To think that I would actually see the legendary Danghun Mountain. This is the soul cultivation holy land that even spectral soul demon venerable praises endlessly. Tai Bai Yunsheng sighed with emotion, praising it endlessly. Even for him, this was the first time he was seeing such a legendary object. Glancing at Fang Yuan, Tai Bai Yunsheng's gaze had a subtle change again. He did not speak, silently using the 3rd bead of immortal essence and continued to activate landscape as before Gu. This time, Danghun Mountain was restored to 40% of its original state. The jade light was not as strong as before. Tai Bai Yunsheng used the 4th bead, the 5th bead of green grape immortal essence, until the 6th bead, Danghun Mountain was restored to 100%. As expected of Danghun Mountain, I expended a total of 6 beads of green grape immortal essence. Only then did I complete the restoration. Tai Bai Yunsheng muttered as he looked at the mountain in front of him. Danghun Mountain was magnificent. It was not something a normal mountain could compare to. It was a crystal mountain, pink in color and emitted a dreamy light. It was unforgettable. Moss Master. Danghun Mountain's illness is finally cured. Little Hu Immortal's eyes were red, sob sob sob. She cried tears of joy as she lowered her head. She used the back of her delicate hands to wipe away her tears. Fang Yuan looked at Danghun Mountain, letting out a breath of turbid air. At this point, his goal of infiltrating northern plains was finally achieved. So many days and nights of hard work, the dangers of the battlefield, the careful disguise, the painstaking planning. None of it was wasted. Right now, Fang Yuan's heart was burning with a blazing flame. The name of this blazing flame was ambition. The fully restored Danghun Mountain could no longer satisfy his appetite. There was still a good opportunity in Imperial Court-blessed land. Especially now, Giant Sun's Will was excluded from the tower. 88-point Jinyang Tower was like an ownerless piece of land. False emotion fake Will Gu was an immortal Gu. It was hard to capture. But Fang Yuan's glib tongue had already obtained Tai Bai Yunsheng's trust. He had successfully roped in a crucial battle strength that could influence the situation. At that time, he could use the Gu Immortal's will to forcefully refine the false emotion fake Will Gu. It was not impossible. Let's go back to Northern Plains. Fang Yuan left in a hurry. He left Hu Immortal Blessed Land with Tai Bai Yunsheng. Before leaving, he handed the Soul-Devouring Toad to Little Hu Immortal. Soul-Devouring Toad was a storage Gu. It was filled with souls of both humans and beasts. Most of them were collected by Fang Yuan from the battlefield. Using Danghun Mountain, he could produce a large number of Guts Gu. Returning to 88-point Jinyang Tower, more than half of the Starlight Firefly Gu supporting the Stargate had been lost. Fang Yuan quickly stored the rest back into his aperture. It was not easy to accumulate Starlight Firefly Gu. The current amount could only support one more opening of the Stargate. We are back again. Tai Bai Yunsheng sighed. This time they went from Northern Plains to Central Continent, and from Central Continent to Northern Plains. It was simply unrestrained, so close yet so far. Tai Bai Yunsheng had only heard of Whole Earth Gu and Connecting Heaven Gu. They could allow blessed lands and grotto heavens to connect, but he had never seen such a method. I'm afraid only a person like Sixth Junior Brother is worthy of such a powerful method. Maybe Master taught him this. The trip to Hu Immortal Blessed Land made Tai Bai Yunsheng trust Fang Yuan even more. Fang Yuan was only a mortal now, but he had a blessed land. This in itself was enough to prove many problems. The magnificent scenery of Danghun Mountain was deeply engraved in Tai Bai Yunsheng's heart. Seeing is believing, hearsay is false. Tai Bai Yunsheng had no choice but to believe. Fang Yuan first showed his true appearance, then used Lifespan Gu, secret information and so on to gain Tai Bai Yunsheng's trust. He also solved Tai Bai Yunsheng's doubts. Why did Truyang Building help him undergo tribulation for no reason? Fang Yuan's words and the evidence he showed Tai Bai Yunsheng were almost all true. Only the crucial parts were lies. 9 truths and 1 lie. The lies became the truth. Especially this lie, it was Tai Bai Yunsheng's deepest secret. After being soul-searched by Fang Yuan, Tai Bai Yunsheng had never revealed it to anyone. The most amazing part of this was that Fang Yuan understood Tai Bai Yunsheng's mentality. Tai Bai Yunsheng felt extremely guilty for betraying Gao Yang and Zhu Zai. He had once denied the value of his existence, and after being provoked, he impulsively underwent tribulation with thoughts of suicide. But after he successfully passed the heavenly tribulation and became a Gu Immortal, he stood at a whole new height and saw a different scenery. His mind started to become active, especially after going through so much to pass the tribulation and obtain an immortal aperture. He did not want to die so much. He wanted to start anew. But he still had a knot in his heart. He needed hope, he needed recognition. This psychological need was something that even Tai Bai Yunsheng did not notice. But Fang Yuan noticed it and gave him recognition. Especially Fang Yuan's recognition, to a certain extent, it represented his teacher's recognition. In Tai Bai Yunsheng's heart, he deeply respected his teacher. His teacher's recognition made him feel that he still had value in living. A mysterious sect, a whole new scenery, it piqued his curiosity. He was at the peak of mortals, he had experienced the mortal world, but on the path to immortality, he was still a child who had just started. The 15-year lifespan Gu was in his possession. He was no longer anxious, he also felt guilty. He chose to believe Fang Yuan, not only because Fang Yuan explained everything, but also gave him a large amount of irrefutable evidence. The most important thing was, from the deepest part of his heart, he was willing to believe in Fang Yuan. But those who were deceived, was it really because they were stupid? No, it was just that they were willing to believe. I will return your immortal Gu to you. Tai Bai Yunsheng threw fixed immortal travel and flying bear phantom Gu to Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan received them as if nothing had happened. His casual attitude towards immortal Gu and his trust towards Tai Bai Yunsheng once again made Tai Bai Yunsheng feel moved. But when Fang Yuan held the glass owner token in his hand and sensed it, he was shocked and quickly brought Tai Bai Yunsheng to another round. Ancient trees towered into the sky. Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yunsheng were in a vast forest. Roars and angry shouts resounded continuously. Giant trees uprooted their roots and stood up, turning into a tall tree man. In an instant, Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yunsheng were heavily surrounded by tree man. Tai Bai Yunsheng's expression was solemn. He did not care about a single tree man, but the number of tree men here was extremely shocking. To completely eliminate all of them, he would need to pay a huge price. But the next moment, Fang Yuan lightly shook the glass owner token in his hand, immediately turning this round into his own. The tree man's charging momentum stopped, its killing intent extinguished. While Tai Bai Yunxing was in a daze, Fang Yuan grabbed his arm and directly brought him in front of He Lulan and Ma Hongyun. Right now there was a huge change in the situation here. Frost Jade Peacock was half lying on the ground. Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun were hiding under its wings. Surrounding them were layers upon layers of tree man, surrounding them and attacking them. He Lulan was fighting alone not far away. The false emotion fake Wu Gu was resting on his shoulder. While fending off the attacks of the Traiants, he continued to attack Ma, Zhao, and Chang. But these attacks were all blocked by the Frost Jade Peacock's light barrier midway. Lord He Lulan, you are also being attacked by the tree man. You are in the same situation as us. We have no enmity with you. Why do you want to kill us? Ma Hongyun shouted. He Lulan snorted coldly. Didn't you hear what Ancestor said earlier? This woman of yours is an otherworldly demon. Her origin is mysterious. She is a disaster and must be eliminated. Who knows, she might be on the same side as the fake Chang Shanin. Ancestor was just about to attack her when he suddenly disappeared and met with a mishap. You are of Giant Sun's bloodline, a person of Northern Plains, yet you can't differentiate right from wrong. You are protecting an otherworldly demon. Ma Hongyun was furious and immediately retorted. She is not an otherworldly demon, she is innocent. Lord He Lulan, don't waste your energy. The two of us have already been recognized by the land spirit. With its help, you cannot kill us. It turned out that when Giant Sun's will was pulled out of the tower, this round had no one in charge and was automatically activated. The tree man treated the land spirit, Ma Hongyun and the rest as challengers. He Lulan wanted to kill Zhao Lianyun for Giant Sun's will. Ma Hongyun sacrificed himself to help. This caused Zhao Lianyun's heart to tremble, and he truly fell in love with Ma Hongyun. Ma Hongyun had already given his heart to Zhao Lianyun. The two of them truly loved each other, and the land spirit took the initiative to recognize them as masters. At the crucial moment, the land spirit created a defensive barrier for the two of them, blocking the fatal attacks of the tree man and He Lulan. As for Changli, she died tragically under the attacks of the tree man. Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yunxing suddenly appeared on the tree man's crown and observed the battle. Ma Hongyun actually obtained the land spirit's recognition. Humph, this lad's luck is really amazing. Fang Yuan muttered with a complex tone. You know him? Tai Bai Yunxing was slightly shocked. He did not expect the Grand Fang Yuan to know this rank 3 initial stage nobody. It's you. He Lulan quickly sensed Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yunxing. His pupils shrunk and he quickly jumped to the side, as if he was facing a great enemy. His eyelids twitched, his heart had already sunk to rock bottom. Giant Sun's will suddenly disappeared. The mysterious man impersonating Chang Shanin appeared again with Gu immortal Tai Bai Yunxing beside him. The two seemed to have a close relationship. This situation was extremely disadvantageous to He Lulan. Ma Hongyun, however, did not sense anything. The land spirit's protective barrier continued to shrink. It was already surrounded by the tree man layer by layer. His and Zhao Lianyun's line of sight had already been blocked by the lush and dense leaves. What do we do now? Tai Bai Yunxing glanced at He Lulan, who had a grim expression, and asked calmly. Fang Yuan sneered. To topple Truyang Building, we need to borrow the power of Imperial Court Blessed Land's land spirit, Frost Jade Peacock. Although Frost Jade Peacock has recognized a master, it is actually taking advantage of the fact that Giant Sun's will is not present and the sealing power on its body is not controlled by anyone, thus it is struggling at death's door. Most of its power has already been sealed again. The defensive light barrier is in imminent danger and cannot stop me. I will go and kill Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun. You go and deal with He Lulan and obtain false emotion fake Wu Gu. I believe with your Gu immortal battle strength it should not be a problem. You need to move quickly, we do not have much time. Immortals and mortals are different. The difference between them is like a chasm. Don't worry. Tai Bai Yunxing smiled lightly and floated up, approaching He Lulan. Fang Yuan shot down like lightning, directly attacking Ma Hongyun. The surrounding tree man, under his will, followed him in layers. Chapter 623. Bam Bam Bam. The 6 10-meter-tall Traiants raised their hammer-like fists high in the air and ruthlessly smashed the light barrier one after another. Frost Jade Peacock cried out. The wide wings had already been sealed by the gold, and only its head was still exposed. Masters, I can't hold on anymore. The land spirit sighed, her long eyelashes trembling. The light barrier was getting weaker and weaker. Under the tree men's attacks, it was on the verge of shattering. More terrifyingly, Feng Yuan was getting closer. Imperial Court Blessed Land was already in ruins, and Frost Jade Land Spirit was sealed. The remaining strength was nothing to Feng Yuan. He could break through at any time. The fatal crisis had already arrived, but Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun had no idea. Even if they could not sense Feng Yuan, the thick aura of death was suffocating. Zhao Lianyun was silent. She leaned on Ma Hongyun with her eyes closed. In essence, she was a woman after all. Ma Hongyun consoled her softly, even though he himself had no hope. It's over. Feng Yuan moved like lightning, stepping on the leaves and entering the innermost layer of the tree men's encirclement. But just as he was about to attack and dive down, Mo Yao suddenly cried out in his mind, "Huh? This aura. Wait a minute. Stop right now. What's wrong?" Feng Yuan's movement halted. He stopped at the top of the tree, bewildered. Ever since Mo Yao's will was placed in his mind, he had never seen Mo Yao have such intense emotional fluctuations. At this moment in Feng Yuan's mind, Mo Yao appeared. Her face was covered in tears, her body was trembling. She muttered to herself, this aura. There's no mistake. This is fortune rivaling Heaven Gu's aura. Fortune rivaling Heaven Gu. Feng Yuan's heart jumped as he recalled. For the sake of her lover Bo Qing, when Mo Yao was alive, he had put in a lot of effort to research the 88-point Jinyang Tower and had taken the risk to enter the True Inheritance mystic realm. Her original goal was to obtain one of the supreme true inheritances, the Luck Path True Inheritance, and steal fortune rivaling Heaven Gu. However, in the end, she was only partially successful. Even though she had gone through a lot of hardships and used all her strength to break a crack in the Luck Path True Inheritance. But fortune rivaling Heaven Gu flew along this crack and disappeared without a trace. However, Mo Yao did not come out empty-handed. She obtained a small portion of the Luck Dao inheritance. Combining with her Refinement Grandmaster Foundation, she finally refined Calamity Beckoning Gu. But Calamity Beckoning Gu was inferior to fortune rivaling Heaven Gu. Mo Yao used Calamity Beckoning Gu to help Bo Qing in his tribulation, but both of them died. Meanwhile, Feng Yuan found the inheritance left behind by Mo Yao and refined Calamity Beckoning Gu again. He accepted Mo Yao's final mission to return the Rank 7 Immortal Gu House Water Pavilion to Spirit Affinity House in the future. Right now, Mo Yao suddenly sensed fortune rivaling Heaven Gu's aura. This was the full effort she put in when she was alive. She used all her wisdom, but still failed to obtain the crucial Immortal Gu. It was not hard to understand why she lost her composure and was so agitated. Fortune rivaling Heaven Gu's aura is on this kid. To think that I, Mo Yao, put in all my effort, narrowly escaping death. I let fortune rivaling Heaven Gu escape. In the end, a mortal kid benefited from it. Is this fate? Mo Yao looked up at the sky and sighed, crying and laughing. Her tone was extremely bleak. Feng Yuan squinted, cold light flashing in his eyes. He asked in his mind, that means fortune rivaling Heaven Gu is on Ma Hongyun? Are you sure? Of course, fortune rivaling Heaven Gu's aura. I will absolutely not forget it. Mo Yao replied resolutely. She continued, fortune rivaling Heaven Gu is rank 8. It is a one-time consumable Gu. It is formless and intangible. It is a lump of grand luck. It is extremely difficult to capture using ordinary methods. Back then, my main body was unable to capture it, causing it to disappear without a trace. Even Truyong Building could not trap it. It must have escaped to northern plains and wandered, finally landing on that kid's body. So it is only a one-time consumable Gu. Feng Yuan was immediately greatly disappointed. Fortune rivaling Heaven Gu was the highest achievement of Giant Sun Immortal's Luck Path True Inheritance. Its value was extremely huge. Feng Yuan could not obtain any benefits in true inheritance secluded domain. It would be best if he could snatch fortune rivaling heaven gu from Ma Hongyun. But unfortunately, fortune rivaling heaven gu was a one-time use gu. It would disappear once used. Feng Yuan, be careful. Fortune rivaling heaven gu is extremely mysterious. Back then, Giant Sun Immortal had many fortuitous encounters, turning calamities into blessings, his luck never ending. It was mostly because of fortune rivaling heaven gu. Ma Hongyu's fortune rivaling heaven gu. He is a true son of luck. His luck is number 1 in the 5 regions. Back then, Giant Sun Immortal had the same luck, he has the same level of luck. Although luck is formless and intangible, it is also a part of strength. You must not look down on it. Mo Yao anxiously reminded. I know my limits. Feng Yuan restrained his killing intent. His gaze was cold as he stood on the branch, not attacking rashly. He looked down at Ma Hongyun and the others from above, allowing the treant beneath his feet to launch its attacks. Actually, the distance between the two was not far, but even Frost Jade Peacock did not discover him. From this, it could be seen how severely weakened the land spirit was. The strength of both sides was clear. It looked like the fruits of victory were at their fingertips. Killing Ma Hongyun was as easy as flipping one's hand. But Feng Yuan did not think so. He was once a gu immortal. His horizons naturally surpassed mortals. He was clear. The so-called gu master paths, wisdom path, strength path, refinement path, metal path, time path, and so on, they looked like a collection of complex and detailed gu worms, but in essence they were the understanding of heaven and earth, the analysis of the profundities of the universe. Luck path was the same. Because of Giant Sun Immortal's example, luck path, compared to other paths, could explain a certain aspect of the profundities of heaven and earth at a deeper level. Feng Yuan had never looked down on Ma Hongyun. He had always placed great importance on him. Because of his previous life's memories, he knew how high Ma Hongyun's future achievements would be. In his previous life, he eventually became the pillar of Northern Plains, the leader who resisted the attacks of Central Continent's gu immortals. When Feng Yuan was besieged, he was still growing healthily. Feng Yuan was clear about Ma Hongyun's growth path, and now he finally understood the source of Ma Hongyun's heaven-defying luck. That was Giant Sun Immortal's greatest achievement in luck path, fortune rivaling heaven gu. And the originator of this was Mo Yao, who resided in Feng Yuan's mind. Although luck did not have a material form and could not be touched, Feng Yuan was clear about its profound power. No wonder giant suns will specially chose He Lulan and Ma Hongyun for the land spirit's ownership. He Lulan is the strongest bloodline descendant, while Ma Hongyun has fortune rivaling heaven. Feng Yuan felt it was quite troublesome. Although Ma Hongyun was only a tiny rank 3 gu master, he had the protection of a rank 8 immortal gu. Rank 8 immortal gu was only inferior to the legendary rank 9 wisdom gu, strength gu, and so on. Its power was extraordinary and beyond imagination. Anyone who dared to underestimate it would have a miserable ending. Feng Yuan was only a mortal back then in true inheritance secluded domain. He could not even get close to the rank 7 human chi immortal gu. Not to mention the rank 8 fortune rivaling heaven gu. Ma Hongyun looked harmless, but in reality, when had he ever suffered a real loss along the way? Every time it was a blessing in disguise. He had endless fortuitous encounters. Those who wanted to harm him or deal with him had instead met with misfortune. Although every time he was not the one who attacked directly. But there would always be other external forces, accidents, and countless coincidences. These external forces, coincidences, and accidents stacked together to form an astonishing might. Feng Yuan suddenly thought of Giant Sun's will. Previously, Giant Sun's will wanted to eliminate Zhao Lianyun. But Ma Hongyun risked his life to protect him. This was equivalent to Giant Sun's will standing on the opposite side of Ma Hongyun. Just as Giant Sun's will was about to make a move, Feng Yuan took action and pulled out Truyong Building, and was now being bombarded by the heavenly tribulation. Even Giant Sun's will was killed. Feng Yuan thought from a different perspective, and was immediately shocked. I have the glass owner token. I can investigate the situation inside 88-point Jinyang Tower. Why did I make a move earlier? It was completely unintentional. Maybe. After hearing that Zhao Lianyun is an otherworldly demon, I wanted to protect her and investigate it out of curiosity. Fang Yuan recalled the situation back then. Giant Sun's Will being expelled from Truyang Building could be said to have been single-handedly caused by him. But the timing was coincidental, allowing Zhao Lianyun and Ma Hongyun to escape the calamity. If I make a move against Ma Hongyun now, will it be the same as Giant Sun's Will, an external force intervening, or some accident happening? Fang Yuan held the glass owner token in his hand, feeling apprehensive. Wait a moment. Fang Yuan thought again. What I heard was actually Mo Yao's side of the story. Mo Yao's will seems trustworthy, but what if she is deceiving me for some special reason? Fang Yuan suddenly thought of this. Thus, he asked Mo Yao in his mind. Strange, I used luck inspection goo earlier and observed almost everyone in the sacred palace. If Ma Hongyun has fortune rivaling heaven, why didn't I notice it? I only saw two people with the most luck. One is He Lulan, the other is Tai Bai Yunsheng. Mo Yao seemed to have expected Fang Yuan to have this question, and immediately answered. What's so strange about that? Fortune rivaling heaven goo is a rank 8 immortal goo. Your luck inspection goo is only a rank 5 mortal goo. An investigative goo that allows the goo master to see luck that is invisible to the naked eye. How can a rank 5 investigative goo detect the luck of a rank 8 immortal goo? Since I can't see it, how can I be sure that Ma Hongyun has fortune rivaling heaven goo? Fang Yuan did not give up, continuing to ask. Oh Fang Yuan, you are too suspicious. Mo Yao sighed before saying, there is a way to confirm it. That is to use investigative goo to observe your own luck. Every time you do something unfavorable to the child of luck, Ma Hongyun, because of the mutual influence of luck, your luck will become even worse. If you don't believe me, you can check it like this. Time was limited. Fang Yuan immediately activated luck inspection goo. His vision immediately changed. Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun only had a small portion of luck, no different from ordinary people. Chapter 624. This black luck was dark and gloomy, making people feel oppressed. It was in the shape of a coffin, firmly enveloping Fang Yuan within it. At some point, Fang Yuan's black death luck had become even larger and denser. Looking into the distance several li away, Tai Bai Yunsheng and He Lulan were fighting fiercely. The luck of both sides was very clear. Above He Lulan's head was still the green cloud luck, continuous and continuous, like a huge green pillar. Above Tai Bai Yunsheng's head, the luck was much less than before, not even 1/6 of the original. Moreover, it was no longer a bright red cloud, but a gloomy dusk, almost like a dark cloud. Fang Yuan turned his gaze back, looking above his head, and started experimenting according to Mo Yao's instructions. The result was just as Mo Yao had said. Every time he had a thought of harming Ma Hongyun, his black coffin luck would expand a little, and its color seemed to become even darker. Fang Yuan, I advise you to leave this troublesome place as soon as possible. Your black coffin luck is too dense, it's frighteningly dark. The danger is right in front of you. Don't think that luck is illusory, think about how the giant sun immortal dominated the world. You are in deep danger now, it's as dangerous as a pile of eggs. The black coffin luck hasn't acted up yet. It's not that you won't get your retribution, it's just that it's not time yet. Mo Yao repeatedly advised in Fang Yuan's mind. But Fang Yuan snorted coldly, his willpower as strong as steel. You want me to retreat? Would he be frightened by mere bad luck? How is that possible? His eyes squinted into slits, and under the shade of the tree crown, the corners of his mouth cracked slightly, revealing his snow-white teeth. Even if it's the worst luck, it won't directly attack me. It has to rely on external objects to kill me. At this moment, at this place I want to see. Who can stop me? Killing intent surged in Fang Yuan's heart, unceasing. He believed in the power of luck, but he believed in himself even more. He wanted to kill Ma Hongyun. I have to give it a try. If he were to shrink back just because of luck, would that be Fang Yuan's style? Ordinary people wouldn't shed tears until they saw the coffin, but he wouldn't shed tears even if he saw the coffin. Are you crazy? That is a rank 8 immortal goo. Sensing Fang Yuan's intense killing intent, Mo Yao screamed. Precisely because he is so strong, it is more interesting to challenge him, isn't it? Fang Yuan laughed heartily. He was no longer Chang Shan-yin with short hair. Instead, his black hair fluttered in the wind, and his brows were filled with wildness. He never minded bullying the weak, but he also had the courage to fight the strong. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. If not now, then when? The floating sea is teased by fate. Shun the waves and follow the stream as cowardly as a worm. True man emo taizong. Even if my body shatters, I will not regret the pain. Fang Yuan softly chanted. His previous craziness was completely restrained, and his face was as calm as water. Crazy, crazy. In his mind, Mo Yao kept muttering. At this moment, the killing intent in Fang Yuan's heart reached its peak. The black coffin's fate above his head also began to expand at a rapid pace. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded by 3 times. I want to see who can save you. Fortune rivaling heaven Gu. Let me see your prowess as well. Fang Yuan was about to make a move. Bam! With a loud sound, the majestic air currents formed into a gale, suddenly pressing towards them from afar. He Lulan flew up, while Tai Bai Yunsheng crawled out of the deep pit with blood flowing out of his mouth. He looked at He Lulan, who was floating in the air, with a shocked expression. You are actually... Before he finished speaking, He Lulan pounced down again. Bam! With a loud sound, the ground shook and dust rose. 10 Extreme Physique. Fang Yuan's pupils shrunk as he muttered in place of Tai Bai Yunsheng. To think that He Lulan actually had one of the 10 extreme physiques. It seemed that it was the great strength true martial physique of the 10 extreme physiques. After a few breaths of time, a figure flew out of the dust. It was Tai Bai Yunsheng. His hair was messy, his face was covered in dust, and his chest was caved in, revealing his pale white bones. Blood sprayed out like a fountain. But soon his body shone with green light, and the blood stopped flowing. The heavy injuries on his body were quickly recovering. In Hu Immortal Blessed Land, Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yunsheng had exchanged information. They knew that Tai Bai Yunsheng had 2 immortal Gu, landscape as before and man as before. But evidently, Tai Bai Yunsheng was not using the immortal Gu man as before, but an ordinary healing Gu. Man as before immortal Gu needed green grape immortal essence to activate. It had great effects, but green grape immortal essence was not easy to accumulate. Thus, unless it was absolutely necessary, Gu immortals would not easily use immortal Gu. Tai Bai Yunsheng, you are a grand Gu immortal. Why are you afraid of a mortal like me? A loud roar shook heaven and earth. He Lulan also flew into the sky, chasing after Tai Bai Yunsheng. Such dense aura of the 10 extreme physiques, terrifying. He Lulan not only has one of the 10 extreme physiques, she is also on the verge of self-detonation. This time, Fang Yuan obtained even more information. Back then, Fang Yuan relied on Bai Ningbing's Northern Dark Ice Soul physique to fight stronger enemies on Qingmao Mountain and overturn the situation. At that time, Bai Ningbing was only rank 3. The higher the cultivation level of the 10 extreme physiques, the stronger the power of self-detonation. Once the rank 5 peak stage He Lulan self-detonates, the power would be even more terrifying. It would not be a problem for her to kill a Gu immortal. Tai Bai Yunsheng's mouth was filled with bitterness. He had no battle intent. Previously, He Lulan's aura was sealed by immortal Gu Dark Limit's power, not leaking out at all. Now that the seal was removed, the majestic aura made people involuntarily feel fear. He was now a human-shaped bomb. Who would dare to get close to him? What if he exploded? Tai Bai Yunsheng had just become an Gu immortal. If he was dragged down by this fugitive He Lulan, wouldn't that be too unjust? To think that He Lulan actually has the great strength true martial physique of one of the 10 extreme physiques. He could actually grow to such a stage. Tai Bai Yunsheng flew with all his might. His speed was astonishing. He was a flying master. The cloud path Gu worms he used were good movement Gu. He Lulan chased after him, but helplessly watched as the distance between them grew further and further. Boom! He Lulan was enraged. Suddenly he punched. The power of this punch was astonishing, and it directly caused a sonic boom, shattering the surrounding air. Following this punch, a fist chi flew out, quickly turning into a strength path phantom. When Fang Yuan had fought in southern border, he had created many beast phantoms. But He Lulan's phantom was not in the shape of a beast, it was in the shape of a human. Moreover, this human phantom was lifelike, exactly the same as He Lulan. Their bodies were swollen, resembling violent bears. A mouthful of jagged snow-white teeth like daggers and sharp swords. Their triangular eyes shone with a malevolent light. This was simply a second He Lulan. Even if I combine all the beast phantoms I created in southern border, I am afraid they are not the human phantom's match. I'm afraid they are not the human phantom's match. Fang Yuan's eyelids twitched. He had extraordinary eyesight. He could tell at one glance that this human phantom had extremely strong battle strength. Once it was used, it could automatically chase after the enemy. It had intelligence. This was the rank 5 peak stage great strength true martial physique. The strength of an attack. It was simply terrifying. Fang Yuan could not estimate how strong this force was in a short period of time, unless he personally fought and experienced it. But he was certain. Such terrifying battle strength had already surpassed the mortal realm. It could be said that He Lulan was a monster who was half a step into Gu immortal realm. The 10 extreme physiques were existences that broke the rules, they were existences that broke ranks. On Qingmao Mountain, Fang Yuan used the 10 extreme physiques to successfully get through the crisis. But this time, the 10 extreme physiques stood on the opposite side of him. If not for a Gu master becoming an immortal, my defense would have increased qualitatively, otherwise Tai Bai Yunsheng would be in even more danger. Tai Bai Yunsheng has just advanced to Gu immortal. He has not accumulated the foundation of a Gu immortal yet. Moreover, he is only a healing Gu master, but he encountered a fierce and tyrannical battle expert like He Lulan. At once, thoughts flashed in Fang Yuan's mind like sparks. The strongest advantage of Gu immortals over mortals is that they have unlimited primeval essence. But He Lulan's true main cultivation path is Strength Path. Strength Path is the least reliant on primeval essence among all paths, and consumes the least primeval essence. Thus, this advantage is almost non-existent. There is also He Lulan's killer move. He actually took a different path and can create such slow and lifelike human phantoms. In a short period of time, he had already created 5 to 6 human phantoms. These phantoms are extraordinary. They are full of intelligence and can actually outflank and obstruct Tai Bai Yunsheng's movement. This is simply unimaginable. It was not strange to create human phantoms. The crucial point was that he could create such intelligent human phantoms. And these human phantoms all had astonishing battle strength. Strength superimposed on intelligence, the power made even Fang Yuan shocked. No wonder in my previous life He Lulan suddenly died. So he had the 10 extreme physiques. Fang Yuan realized. Although he had been reborn, he did not know everything. But now, his plans were disrupted by this accident. Damn it! Fang Yuan could not help but tightly clench the glass owner token in his hand. According to his original plan, he wanted to follow Giant Sun's will's train of thought and use false emotion fake Will Gu to subdue the land spirit and become the owner of Imperial Court blessed land. To do this, he needed to subdue false emotion fake Will Gu. But false emotion fake Will Gu was one of the ordinary true inheritances, and the Gu contained Giant Sun's will. How could a mere mortal like Fang Yuan refine an immortal venerable's will? Only a Gu immortals will had such a possibility. Thus Fang Yuan used his glib tongue and deceived Tai Bai Yunsheng into becoming his ally, wanting to use his will to cooperate with him in refining false emotion fake Will Gu. But when he returned to Truyang building, the situation changed unexpectedly. Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun became the owners of Imperial Court blessed land, and were recognized by Frost Jade Peacock. The condition for Frost Jade Peacock to recognize a master was 2 Gu master lovers who truly loved each other. Ma Hongyun was a rank 3 Gu master, but Zhao Lianyun was still a girl and had not started her cultivation path yet. She could actually be recognized as a master. From this, it could be seen that the Gu master condition was only referring to aptitude. As long as there was a possibility of becoming a Gu master, they could be recognized. Zhao Lianyun was a wisdom path Gu immortal in his previous life, so she naturally had strong cultivation aptitude. This was not worth fussing over. As far as Fang Yuan was concerned, he had 2 things to do. The first was to obtain false emotion fake Will Gu. It was with He Lulan, so Fang Yuan handed this matter to Tai Bai Yunsheng. The second was to kill Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun. As long as he killed them, Imperial Court Blessed Land would return to being ownerless. After doing these two things, Tai Bai Yunsheng would help Fang Yuan refine false emotion fake Will Gu, and he would be able to control the land spirit. Even if Giant Sun's Will returned, Fang Yuan would have the ability to contend against it. Chapter 625. He Lulan exposed her true trump card. The 10 extreme physique that was on the verge of self-detonation had shocking battle strength. She actually suppressed the Grand Gu immortal Tai Bai Yunsheng and chased after him. This situation was surprising, but after thinking about it, it was not surprising. If I can't defeat He Lulan, I can't take the false emotion fake Will Gu. Without false emotion fake Will Gu, how can I subdue the land spirit? Damn it. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth. His plan was ruined. Is this the power of fortune rivaling heaven? I was just about to attack when such an accident happened. Fang Yuan looked at Ma Hongyun with a solemn expression. For some reason, the killing intent in his heart became even more intense. He crossed his arms and stood on a tall branch, his lips curled into a cold smile. This is getting more interesting, fortune rivaling heaven. Humph. Now that He Lulan and Tai Bai Yunsheng are entangled, if I insist on killing you, how can you resist? This time Fang Yuan did not make a move, but directly manipulated the tree man. The few tree ants in the innermost layer raised their giant hammer-like hands high up in unison. Under Fang Yuan's control, they raised their fists and smashed down together. Bam! With a loud sound, Frost Jade Peacock cried out miserably. Its raised head also fell to the ground. The defensive barrier that it put up with all its strength was completely shattered, turning into specks of golden light that quickly dissipated. The final obstruction was also gone. The tree man who was closest to it took a big step and stretched out its sinister giant palm, grabbing towards Ma and Zhao Lianyun at a seemingly slow speed. Zhao Lianyun screamed in fear, while Ma Hongyun hugged him tightly with his back facing the tree man's palm. Die! Fang Yuan softly muttered. He completely ignored the black coffin luck that was rapidly expanding above his head. The tree man completely opened its palm. A huge shadow firmly enveloped Ma and Zhao Lianyun. With just a light pinch, Ma and Zhao Lianyun would definitely be crushed into meat paste. But right at this moment, the 88-point Jinyang Tower suddenly shook intensely. The world shook. You scoundrel! How dare you expel me? Die! An extremely loud and clear voice suddenly burst out, piercing through heaven and earth, causing Fang Yuan's eardrums to hurt slightly. Hearing this familiar voice, Ma Hongyun raised his head in surprise. He shouted, "It's the old ancestor. The old ancestor wasn't killed. He's back." He Lulan also looked pleasantly surprised. Tai Bai Yunsheng's expression was pale. Once Giant Sun's Will returned, 88-point Jinyang Tower would display the true power of a rank 8 immortal Gu house. It could trap Gu immortals to death. This was not a joke. Impossible. Even if I had spent a lot of time in Hu immortal blessed land, I would not have been able to defeat him. But a quarter of an hour is far from over. Fang Yuan's pupils shrank to the size of a needle tip. He was extremely shocked. He quickly used the glazed abode master token to check on the situation. Outside the 88-point Jinyang Tower, there were layers upon layers of golden sand-like light particles. That was the incomparably large Giant Sun's Will. It was still roaring and roaring, while resisting the bombardment of the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity, while exerting pressure in an attempt to enter Truyang Tower. The Giant Sun's Will outside did not come in. What is going on with the Giant Sun's Will inside? Where did it come from? Fang Yuan was extremely puzzled. But this Giant Sun's Will that suddenly appeared did not give him any time to think. Heaven and earth shook. Those that were running helped Tai Bai Yunsheng attack. The tree ants surrounding Ma Hongyun all stopped moving, as if they were stone statues. At that time Giant Sun's Will be tortured by fortune-rivaling Heaven Gu. Mo Yao's words caused Fang Yuan to be greatly moved. For a moment, his hidden killing intent towards Ma Hongyun also abruptly diminished. Wait a moment. Ma and Zhao are in danger. They might be trampled to death by the tree man at any moment, or even crushed to pieces. If I make a move now, wouldn't I be saving them? Fang Yuan was stunned when he thought of this. Although Ma Hongyun was only rank 3, he was too difficult to kill. The first time Fang Yuan made a move, He Lulan revealed her trump card, becoming one of the 10 extremities, and chased after Tai Bai Yunsheng. The second time he made a move, giant suns will appeared out of nowhere, heavily injuring Fang Yuan. Even now, his ears were still buzzing. His mind had been reduced by 30%. Although he managed to protect the glass owner token and harm giant sun's will, he also lost control of this round. Now the third time Fang Yuan made a move, it was actually Mo Yao who came to persuade him. But the persuasion was so reasonable. Even Fang Yuan himself could not help but be moved. Because earlier, Fang Yuan wanted to kill Ma Hongyun to make the land spirit recognize him as its master again. But now He Lulan erupted with her true battle strength, protecting the false emotion fake Wu Gu. Fang Yuan did not have the false emotion fake Wu Gu. Why did he still want to kill Ma and Zhao? The tree man's body would be torn apart by this attack, and the tree vines would not be able to shift in time. In the end, Ma and Zhao Lianyun would be hit by the attack. They would be smashed into meat paste. Even if there were tens of thousands of tree men in the vast sea of trees, it was all too late. Fang Yuan was decisive. He brazenly burst out, breaking through the defense line, and successfully seized the crucial moment. The tree man's movement had always been slow, and the speed of its reinforcements was not outstanding. Ma Hongyun was dead for sure. At this moment it was not only Fang Yuan. Even giant suns will thought the same. Not only them, Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun also did not have any hope of escaping. All the factors that affected the situation seemed to have their own effects. He Lulan, Tai Bai Yunsheng, 88 Point Jinyang Tower, Giant Suns Wolf, Frost Jade Peacock, Fang Yuan, Mo Yao. These people or things at this moment had done their best. Time seemed to slow down. Fang Yuan's mouth slightly curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. A faint smile appeared on her face. What else can save Ma Hongyun? But at the next moment, boom! A loud sound rang out, shaking the heaven and earth. A threatening golden light illuminated the entire checkpoint. Could it be that Giant Suns Will has once again entered the Truyang building? Fang Yuan's heart sank. But soon he found out that was not the case. Giant Suns Will was still being beaten outside the tower. Central Continent's Gu immortals had planned for so many years. The third method they had deliberately created could not be underestimated. If not for this, in Fang Yuan's previous life, Central Continent's Gu immortals would not have returned triumphantly and successfully toppled 88 Point Jinyang Tower. A huge golden light lump. Like a meteor, it smashed into the ground with lightning speed, instantly melting the surrounding tree man and protecting Ma and Zhao at the center. Isn't this that luck path's supreme true inheritance? In his mind, Mo Yao was extremely shocked. He could not help but scream. What's going on? Isn't the supreme true inheritance in true inheritance secluded domain? Why did it suddenly charge into this checkpoint and fall into Ma Hongyun's hands? Fang Yuan was helpless. He could only stop moving forward. He had already experienced the power of a supreme true inheritance in true inheritance secluded domain. This was not something he could come into contact with. But why was Ma Hongyun completely fine when he was in the ball of light? At once, Fang Yuan could not help but feel a huge sense of dejection in his heart. He used all his battle strength to attempt to kill Ma Hongyun for the third time. Even though he saw hope a moment ago and success was at hand, he still failed in the end. Why would the supreme true inheritance fall into Ma Hongyun's hands? This is impossible. In his mind, Mo Yao completely lost her composure. She scratched her head with her hands. Her long hair was in a mess. She looked like a crazy woman. It was no wonder she was acting like this. Her main body had worked hard and expended a lot of effort, but only managed to break a small crack in the luck path true inheritance. She even let fortune rivaling heaven Gu escape. In the end, she had no choice but to refine Calamity Beckoning Gu. In the end, Calamity Beckoning Gu did not help her beloved Bo Qing. She and Bo Qing both died. At this moment, she She saw the entire luck path supreme true inheritance throwing itself into the arms of a rank 3 mortal. Even if you have fortune rivaling heaven, you can't do this, right? Why can't it be me? I worked so hard and paid such a huge price, why can't it be me? But it had to be him, a mortal, a fool, a child. Comparing oneself to others was infuriating. Fang Yuan forced himself to calm down. He tried to get rid of his irrelevant emotions, thinking hard. Interesting. This killer move is very powerful. It is almost on par with my killer move. But more importantly, he has such rich battle experience. His fist and leg technique is at master level. If it were someone else, they might not be able to display this killer move's power to such an extent. He Lulan licked his lips, his eyes shining with ruthlessness and excitement. The attack earlier was naturally not his full strength, it was only a probing attack. The battle with Tai Bai Yunsheng made He Lulan feel extremely sullen. Because Tai Bai Yunsheng's main focus was to escape, but He Lulan could not keep up, he had no way to use his strength. Now that a tough opponent like Fang Yuan had appeared, his battle intent naturally surged. After destroying the 3 human silhouettes, Fang Yuan did not rashly attack, he floated on the spot. Both sides were thousands of steps apart, their gazes colliding fiercely. Stop fighting. Come here and help. At this time, He Lulan suddenly heard Giant Sun's Will's instruction. But, old ancestor. He Lulan immediately hesitated, his battle intent becoming chaotic. Giant Sun Immortal had a very high status in his heart. This had nothing to do with his personality, it was the sense of honor that had been instilled in him since he was young. This had already become an important factor for He Lulan to affirm his own value. Don't care about them. Killing otherworldly demons and taking back the supreme luck path true inheritance is the most important thing. Giant Sun's Will spoke quickly. This is the only copy. This is the only luck path true inheritance left in this world. Even the longevity heaven did not leave behind any information on luck path. I am about to open the passage to the true inheritance secluded domain. Go and help push the luck path true inheritance into the secluded domain. This round was already under Giant Sun's Will's control. There were as many tree men as there was an ocean of them. However, even if Giant Sun's Will had the ability to break the luck path true inheritance, he could not do this. Firstly, it would take too long and problems would arise. Chapter 628. Inside 88-point Jinyang Tower, the situation was constantly changing, rising and falling. The terrifying Will left behind by the rank 9 immortal venerable Giant Sun who had once dominated the world and ruled over an era, specially used to control 88-point Jinyang Tower, the undisputed victor of this Northern Plains Imperial Court contest, the current generation tribe leader of the super tribe He tribe, who had one of the 10 extreme physiques, great strength true martial physique He Lulan, the land spirit Frost Jade Peacock who stood at the center of Northern Plains for countless years but was sealed for 10,000 years, the living legend who used almost all of his life to roam Northern Plains and heal the injured. His benevolent name was widely spread. He had a Gu immortal inheritance. He became a rank 6 Gu immortal and possessed 2 mystical immortal Gu, Tai Bai Yunsheng, and the owner of rank 7 of the top 10 mystical Gu, Spring Autumn Cicada, and now the owner of Hu immortal blessed land, a mortal who possessed several immortal Gu, Owl Demon Gu Fang Yuan, who had been reborn after 500 years, favored by rank 8 fortune rivaling heaven Gu. He became a Gu immortal in Fang Yuan's previous life. He inherited Fairy Giant Sun's inheritance, obtained thieving heaven demon venerables fortuitous encounter, and became the great hero of Northern Plains, who resisted Central Continent's invasion recognized as an otherworldly demon by Giant Sun's Will. Fang Yuan became Ma Hongyan's wife in his previous life. She was a wisdom path Gu immortal who gave countless help to her husband, the legendary woman Zhao Lianyun also. The former rank 7 Gu immortal refinement path grandmaster, 36th generation fairy of spirit affinity house, The mysterious will left behind after the death of Mo Yao, who schemed for 88-point Jinyang Tower. Each of these existences had their own thoughts, and each had their own goals. On the stage of this imperial court-blessed land that was on the verge of collapse, they clashed and competed intensely. They each had their own advantages and methods, as well as their own weaknesses and weaknesses. These were not outstanding geniuses, they were outstanding elites. They were not skilled in scheming. Working together meant that one's strength was immense, and one's luck was overwhelming. Under the stimulation of life and death, under the temptation of huge benefits, these existences did not give it their all. They used all of their methods, taking drastic measures, staking it all on one throw, or working together to create ingenious arrangements. Thus the situation was sometimes clear. Sometimes it was confusing. At this point, the competition between the various parties was still extremely chaotic. Only the Frost Jade Peacock would be eliminated first. The other people's every move would tilt the entire situation, so they couldn't be underestimated. It would greatly affect the final outcome. Now, the main body of Giant Sun's will was temporarily pulled out of the 88-point Jinyang Tower by Fang Yuan's trump card, and was struck by the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. Giant Sun's will's strength was the strongest on one hand, the main will was trying to return on the other hand. He was risking his life to bring out the true inheritance's will clone, regaining control of the checkpoint. His priority was to kill the otherworldly demon Zhao Lianyun. Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun unexpectedly became the owners of Imperial Court-blessed land. With the protection of the luck path true inheritance, his life was temporarily saved. Fang Yuan and Tai Bai Yunsheng formed a temporary alliance, and had a tentative confrontation with He Lulan. He Lulan's battle intent surged. He was about to fight with Fang Yuan, but at this time Giant Sun's will requested him to shift the battlefield to deal with Ma Hongyun and take back the luck path true inheritance. Dozens of true inheritances were dominated by the newly born wild wills. They were like headless flies rampaging around. From time to time they collided with each other, creating sparks as they were continuously damaged. This scene made Mo Yao's heart ache. Quickly make your choice, Fang Yuan. These true inheritances are destroying each other. If the damage is severe, even if you get them, you might lose their essence. As for Fang Yuan, he did not have much time left. He could only take one true inheritance. Regarding this, Fang Yuan already had a plan. He said solemnly, Mo Yao, I need your help. Speak. Point me to the location of the final supreme true inheritance. Fang Yuan's words caused Mo Yao to be stunned. Immediately after, her eyes and mouth opened wide. Her mind was in extreme shock. In 88-point Jinyang Tower, there were 3 supreme true inheritances. Mo Yao was very clear. When Fang Yuan entered true inheritance secluded domain, she had given him pointers. The first supreme true inheritance was rank 9 wisdom gu. The second supreme true inheritance was Giant Sun Immortal's luck path inheritance. The third supreme true inheritance was 88-point Jinyang Tower itself. That was to say, if one obtained this true inheritance, they would be able to control 88-point Jinyang Tower. Why didn't I think of that? Mo Yao mumbled. Giant Sun's will has been completely mobilized. This is the best time to seize control of 88-point Jinyang Tower. That's right. Giant Sun's will was too preoccupied with dealing with Zhao Lianyun. He exposed his greatest weakness, thus giving us a chance to turn the tables. Fang Yuan's eyes shined with an unstoppable sharp light. He looked around, his chest burning with the flames of ambition. The enemy's weakness was acutely grasped by him. Success or failure depended on this. As long as he could take control of 88-point Jinyang Tower, he would have the home advantage. At that time, no matter how strong Giant Sun's will was, he would be a drowning dog locked outside the door. Looking at the tightly shut door, he could only sigh helplessly. Giant Sun's will roared in anger. From this ruthless attack, large numbers of Giant Sun's wills were destroyed. On the golden sand-like armor, a huge wound was revealed. This snow war tribulation lightning had unparalleled power. It was extraordinary. Gu immortals saw it and their expressions changed. This was one of the publicly recognized 10 great catastrophes. Just this attack alone destroyed an unknown number of Giant Sun's wills. But Giant Sun's will was ultimately left behind by an immortal venerable. Its foundation was extremely strong. On the golden sand-like armor, the wound was quickly mended and healed. Just that, other than the snow war tribulation lightning, there were still flying needles, explosive hailstones, heartless wind scythes, etc. These changes. Originally there were none. When Tai Bai Yunxing ascended, he left behind the heavenly calamity chaotic lightning ball, the earthly calamity shackling smoke signal, and the 10-year blizzard calamity. The heavenly calamity and earthly calamity continued to pour down, as though it carried the majestic anger of the world. Giant Sun's will resisted with all his might. The losses were heavy. Soon, in just half a minute, I will be able to break through the obstruction and enter 88-point Jinyang Tower again. To actually dare to chase me out of the tower and lock me outside. I will peel off your skin and bones, grind your bones into ashes, and make you wish you were dead. Giant Sun's will thought of Feng Yuan. He had already escaped from his anger. Inside 88-point Jinyang Tower, there was still a small portion of Giant Sun's will. Right now, it was controlling the Tree Man round, wholeheartedly activating Tree Man, trying to push Giant Sun's inheritance back into true inheritance secluded domain. Be gentle, don't be too rough. This is the only copy in the world. Giant Sun's will continue to take care of He Lulan. He Lulan was extremely angry, but she could only be gentle. Giant Sun Immortal only left behind one luck path true inheritance. If it was destroyed, could no longer be restored. Precisely because of this, Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun, who were inside the luck path true inheritance, were able to survive for now. The two of them hugged each other tightly, helplessly looking at the huge light ball of the luck path true inheritance being pushed into the circular passage above their heads. Even though in Feng Yuan's previous life they were both famous people, they had both become Gu immortals. But right now they were too weak. One was a newly advanced rank 3 Gu master, while the other was a mortal who had not even started on her cultivation path. Tai Bai Yunsheng and that Chang Shanin have disappeared. They have all disappeared. He Lulan could not help but remind them as they were about to succeed. Ever since Feng Yuan disappeared, he had been feeling uneasy. No need to care about them. In a while my main bodies will return. At that time, even if 2 or 3 more Gu immortals come, they will not be able to do anything. Now send the luck path true inheritance into true inheritance secluded domain. Most luck path Gu worms are formless and have no substance. Only there can truly imprison these Gu worms. Giant Sun's will's voice resounded in He Lulan's ears. He Lulan nodded, giving a low shout and exerting strength. At once 50 strength path phantoms appeared. These strength path phantoms had extraordinary intelligence. They all pounced towards the luck path true inheritance. Enduring the blazing light of the true inheritance, they pushed it up together. The luck path true inheritance was finally pushed into true inheritance secluded domain by this force. The passageway closed. Success! Giant Sun's will let out a breath of turbid air. Almost at the same time, the majestic main bodies will also charged in from outside the tower. Giant Sun's will, who was in charge of the Tree Man round, returned. The two fused into one, immediately sharing their memories. Feng Yuan, where are you? The main bodies will roared with a vengeance. Greetings to Ancestor. He Lulan bowed deeply, showing a joyful expression. The main bodies will was like a small sun, shining over 10,000 li with awe-inspiring might. It could be said that He Lulan had helped Giant Sun's will a lot. Giant Sun's will was just about to praise him, when he suddenly shouted in anger, "You are courting death. You actually want to refine my 88-point Jinyang Tower." In True Yang secluded domain, Feng Yuan and Tai Bai Yunsheng stretched out their palms, pressing on the true inheritance light lump. Their faces were pale and their bodies were trembling. Quick! Just a little more and we will succeed. In his mind, Mo Yao's will shouted anxiously. strength path phantoms, sinister fire snakes, sharp sword lights, pure white frost and snow. All kinds of attacks converged together, forming a beautiful and multicolored smoke. Fatal killing intent assaulted him, but Tai Bai Yunsheng could not divert his attention. He was doing his best to resist the expansion of Giant Sun's will in the true inheritance light lump. Fang Yuan opened his eyes and mobilized the flying bear phantom, activating a killer move at the same time. 6-arm Heavenly Zombie King. In an instant he turned into an 8-armed monster, his aura surging. His fighting spirit soared. The flying bear phantom held miserably, using its huge body as a meat shield, blocking the attacks of He Lulan and the rest. The river-like Giant Sun's will regained its freedom, immediately pouncing towards Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan protected Tai Bai Yunsheng, not dodging or evading. He faced the river-like Giant Sun's will head-on. Boom! The two fiercely collided. An earth-shattering sound erupted, and boundless golden light burst out. A large number of special wills shattered and dissipated. Fang Yuan was heavily injured. 6 of his 8 arms were broken. His chest was caved in, and his right calf had disappeared without a trace. One of his eyes was also completely blinded. Fang Yuan, you will die for sure this time. You actually ascended to immortal now. Who do you think you are? The reincarnation of an immortal venerable? Humph, since you are seeking death, I will fulfill your wish. The river-like Giant Sun's will gathered into the shape of a giant python, coiling into a ball. After accumulating strength, its whole body shone with a threatening golden radiance. Fang Yuan snorted coldly, not replying. The terrifying injuries on his body were rapidly recovering at a visible speed. He had transformed into a heavenly zombie. His sense of pain was completely gone, and he was using death energy to replace life energy. Thus his recovery speed rose sharply. There was no need for any rank 5 healing goo. Boom, boom, boom. Intense explosions resounded one after another. Fang Yuan and the river-like Giant Sun's will engaged in an intense battle. Scoundrel, get down here! During the battle, Giant Sun's will changed according to his will, suddenly turning into a huge hand and ruthlessly grabbing Fang Yuan's back. Swoosh! The eagle wings on Fang Yuan's back were torn apart. They were torn apart, forming 2 huge gashes that revealed the pale white bones. Eagle Rizgu was destroyed. Fang Yuan suffered such heavy injuries, but his body did not move. He suddenly twisted his waist and turned around. The strength was so great that only a cracking sound could be heard. His lumbar vertebrae were directly broken. Fang Yuan did not care about his injuries. He raised his bull-sized fist and punched towards Giant Sun's will. Bam, bam, bam. In an instant, intense winds blew, fist shadows flew everywhere, like a fierce dragon crossing the river, or a fierce tiger descending the mountain unstoppable. The huge hand formed by Giant Sun's will had not even had time to split apart when it was hit by this fierce attack. A vast number of wills were shattered. It similarly suffered heavy injuries. Like a colorful golden rain, Fang Yuan's figure shot out like lightning. Giant Sun's will was about to counterattack, but Fang Yuan was already no longer far away. He roared in anger. Fang Yuan did not linger to fight. He was as calm as ice, never letting his fighting spirit get to his head. The injuries on his body rapidly recovered. Fang Yuan breathed roughly. The pressure from the battle with Giant Sun's will was like a mountain. He had already used all his strength, but this was undoubtedly the strongest enemy he had faced since his rebirth. The two sides regained their footing, and after a few breaths of time, they fought again. So what if you are an immortal goo? Die! On another battlefield, He Lulan's shout could be heard. Right now it was occupied by a lump of three-colored qi, waiting for the vital goo to enter and complete the final step, exploding the immortal aperture after accumulating for a long time. If the immortal aperture did not explode, Feng Yuan's life would be devoured by the qi of heaven and earth, and he would die. If the immortal aperture exploded, no matter what grade it was at this crucial moment, Feng Yuan's mind would be empty, and he would fall into a vulnerable state where he would be defenseless. This period of time varied from person to person. If the enemy took advantage of this moment, Feng Yuan's outcome would be worrying, and he might die without a proper burial. Right now, He Lulan and the rest were stopping Feng Yuan at this step. Feng Yuan did not dare to release the goo. He could only let the compressed three-colored qi lump in his body tremble. This cannot go on. If this drags on for a certain period of time, the three-colored qi lump will disperse and all the accumulations I used to advance to goo immortal will be for naught. Feng Yuan's mind was filled with thoughts as he tried to think of a way to break out of this dangerous situation. Rumble, right at this moment, True Inheritance secluded domain suddenly shook. Rumble. Immediately after, there was another wave of shaking, making people feel uneasy and fearful. What's going on? What happened? Is True Inheritance secluded domain going to collapse? He Lulan, Yi Lui Sang and the rest had worried expressions. They knew. This was the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity outside the tower. It had finally reached the main body of 88-point Jinyang Tower. Feng Yuan and Tai Bai Yunxing were overjoyed. This proved that Giant Sun's will had used all his strength. The heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity were extremely terrifying. Even he had reached his limit. Damn it, I finally made it. Giant Sun's will breathed roughly. He was fearful and glad. He did not even have the strength to curse Feng Yuan. Giant Sun's will, which was originally 10 feet thick and wrapped around 88-point Jinyang Tower like a golden armor, was now only left with a thin layer. It was dim and without light. 36 chaotic branching fangs were not as simple as stacking on top of each other. Their power had increased by almost 10 times. During the entire process, Snow War Tribulation lightning was crazily striking everywhere, as if it did not cost anything. The originally fleeting lightning had become as bright as sunlight, shining endlessly. This showed the terrifying frequency of Snow War Tribulation lightning. Giant Sun's will had narrowly escaped death. He only had less than 1% of his will left. He attacked with all his might. After much effort, he managed to destroy 11 whirlpools in advance. The remaining chaotic branching fangs exploded together. Giant Sun's will risked his life to block most of them, but there were still 7 that he could not block. 7 wounds appeared on 88-point Jinyang Tower. Especially 4 of them, they directly pierced through True Yang Tower, creating 4 passages. Feng Yuan and the rest were in True Inheritance secluded domain. The tremors they felt originated from this. My 88-point Jinyang Tower. Giant Sun's will inspected it, his heart bleeding. He almost could not help but wail. The losses were too huge. The number of goo worms that were lost was not only huge. Moreover, there were 1 or 2 immortal goo among them. To replenish these goo worms and restore 88-point Jinyang Tower to its original state, who knew how long it would take? Feng Yuan, you wretched bastard. You underwent tribulation yourself, but you want me to bear the consequences. I will make you regret being born in this world. Giant Sun's will fiercely cursed in his heart. The giant cocoon formed by the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity was already thinning. At this time, several pillars of light shone down from the sky. Through the dark clouds, the light shone on the damaged 88-point Jinyang Tower. The heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity were slowly dissipating. Giant Sun's will slowly let go of the boulder in his heart. He almost cried tears of joy. This heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity is finally ending. It is finally ending. I finally made it. Although 88-point Jinyang Tower was heavily damaged, the foundational goo worms were not lost. No matter how many mortal goo were destroyed, they can be replenished. The immortal goo that were lost are more troublesome, but they can also be refined again. Even if someone else got it first, they can also use other goo worms to replace them. The outcome is set. Next, we need to kill the otherworldly demon, and then take care of this scoundrel Feng Yuan. Seeing the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity dissipating in front of him, Giant Sun's will, who was about to take revenge, felt much better. At this time, a large light blue hand gradually appeared. It appeared in front of Giant Sun's will. This is. The remaining Giant Sun's will's body shook intensely. He was even more frightened than when he saw 70 to 80 random teeth. This is Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable's killer move. Formless hand. This damned Feng Yuan, why is his luck so bad? He actually caused such a calamity. Rank 9 Gu immortals were invincible in the world. They could leave behind a unique mark in the whole world. Even if they died, some killer moves would appear again in the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. I know. This Feng Yuan was extremely daring. He wanted to kill the child of luck Ma Hongyun, but in the end, he suffered the backlash of fortune Gu. His luck was terrible. Thus, he caused such a terrifying heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity. Giant Sun's will thought of the reason. He felt extremely bitter. In the end, the source was fortune rivaling Heaven Gu left behind by Giant Sun Immortal. Under a freak combination of factors, Giant Sun's will was actually tricked by his own arrangements. Back then, Thieving Heaven Demon Venerable used Formless Hand to rob and steal countless Gu worms. The whole world was helpless against it. But thankfully, this Formless Hand only has 5 fingers. It can at most snatch rank 5 Gu. Oh heavens! Giant Sun's will muttered to himself. Suddenly his voice rose as he lost his composure and screamed. He saw the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity slowly dissipate, as large numbers of formless hands appeared one after another. 200, 300 countless formless hands appeared, numbering in the tens of thousands. Among them, there were 1-finger formless hands to 5-finger formless hands. They occupied the majority. There were 16 6-finger formless hands, 9 7-finger formless hands. There were even 3 8-finger formless hands. This is impossible. Even if Feng Yuan suffered the backlash of fortune rivaling Heaven Gu, no matter how bad his luck is, it can't be this bad. Giant Sun's will shouted in disbelief. It's over, everything is over. Giant Sun's will wailed if he could cry. His face would definitely be covered in tears. At once, large numbers of golden wills scattered, like sand falling from the surface of 88-point Jinyang Tower. This was the will collapsing by itself. There was no longer any will to fight. It could not endure such a blow. It turned out that the heavenly tribulation and earthly calamity had not ended. They had all transformed into this final tribulation. Formless hands. The remaining Giant Sun's will shrunk into a ball, exposing 88-point Jinyang Tower to the outside. In true inheritance secluded domain, Feng Yuan and the others were still in the dark, not knowing what was happening. The pursuit continued. After suffering the backlash of heaven and earth chi, both sides had already lost over 100 Gu worms. Both sides were desperately holding on. Feng Yuan did not have many movement Gu left, but he had already found a way to break out of this predicament. Bringing the pursuers behind him after making a big detour, he suddenly changed his direction and flew towards Tai Bai Yunsheng. Quick, senior brother. Open your immortal aperture and let me in. Only there can I avoid the pursuit and smoothly ascend to immortal. Feng Yuan transmitted his voice. This Tai Bai Yunsheng unavoidably fell into hesitation. The immortal aperture was the foundation of a Gu immortal. If Feng Yuan were to be placed inside, if he failed, the consequences would be borne by Tai Bai Yunsheng. At such a crucial moment, senior brother, why are you still hesitating? Only after I ascend to immortal can we have a chance to fight. Don't worry. I have full confidence in advancing to immortal. Feng Yuan shouted. This Gu was obtained by Feng Yuan in southern border. After being refined to rank 4, it could help Feng Yuan activate beast phantoms at will. All-out effort Gu go. Feng Yuan softly muttered. All-out effort Gu completely obeyed Feng Yuan's will, charging towards the compressed 3-colored chi lump. Boom! Feng Yuan's body shook intensely, as if thunder had exploded in his mind. The chi lump suddenly exploded, breaking and reforming, forming an immortal aperture. Inside the immortal aperture, the sky was orange, and there was a white stone mountain on the ground. The immortal aperture was newly formed, and the space inside was very limited, but soon it began to expand. Like a newborn baby, it urgently needed to replenish nutrients. The immortal aperture's nutrients were heaven and earth qi. Senior brother Tai Bai, quickly let me out, Fang Yuan quickly said. You succeeded. Tai Bai Yunxing was overjoyed but warned, be careful after you come out, the situation is very dangerous now. At the next moment, Fang Yuan's vision changed. Tai Bai Yunxing let him out of the immortal aperture and appeared beside the ladder. This is a formless hand? 500 years of experience was not for show. Fang Yuan immediately recognized the origin of the giant light blue hand and turned pale with fright. Sensing his aura, a six-fingered formless hand suddenly appeared above Fang Yuan's head. It grabbed down. Chapter 639. As time passed, Fang Yuan no longer had the chance to smash the formless fists. Under the pursuit of the formless hands, he was exhausted from running for his life. Quickly return my goo worm. By coincidence, He Lulan finally arrived in front of Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan sneered and activated wind flower goo. A translucent wind flower immediately appeared on his body and rapidly changed direction. Whoosh! With the help of wind flower goo, Fang Yuan's speed did not change, but he changed direction and avoided He Lulan. He Lulan, however, was overjoyed. My time has come. Why did you have to go in this direction? Fang Yuan had not flown far when his speed suddenly fell. His expression changed as he sensed that he had fallen into a dark whirlpool. This was a trap set by He Lulan using expendable goo, specially used to trap enemies. The formless hands behind him were already less than 100 steps away. Fang Yuan snorted and did not panic in the face of danger, activating Flash Bug Goo. Flash Bug Goo suddenly disappeared along with his body, and the next moment he appeared 500 steps away. Fang Yuan escaped and immediately increased his speed, but in less than a few breaths of time, he once again fell into a dark whirlpool. He activated Flash Bug Goo once again to escape, but immediately after, he fell into a third dark whirlpool. True Inheritance secluded domain was originally filled with darkness, and the dark whirlpool was extremely well concealed here. Before it was activated, it was calm without any clues. But once it was activated, it formed an entangling force, as if he had fallen into a quicksand swamp. You can't escape. This place has a circumference of 100 li. I have scattered countless goo worms and set up countless traps. He Lulan shouted as she rapidly approached Fang Yuan. Fang Yuan suffered a loss due to his poor scouting. He was furious. You are courting death, don't blame me. Saying so, he activated six-arm Heavenly Zombie King Killer move. Exerting strength and breaking free from the whirlpool, charging towards He Lulan. He Lulan's heart trembled, and then she was overjoyed. He was not afraid of Fang Yuan's attack. He was afraid that the other party would flee, not giving him a chance to fight. The two of them had new and old grudges, and they both wished they could kill each other. But they had yet to fight. He Lulan was the first to make a sharp turn to avoid the attack. After that, Fang Yuan's expression changed as well, and he retreated with all his might. It was too scary. A large group of formless hands, whistling down from the sky. There were 500 to 600 of them. The pale blue radiance was continuous, illuminating the surrounding space in a pale blue color. The group of non-phase hands divided into two groups, respectively chasing after Fang Yuan and He Lulan. Fang Yuan immediately fell into the most dangerous situation he had ever been in. He absolutely did not dare to fly between the formless hands. There were so many formless hands, with just a slight movement they could easily seal off all the routes. Feng Yuan had no choice but to fly quickly, with a large group of giant light blue hands chasing after him. "No, don't come over!" Yi Luisang shouted in panic. He and the other 3 Gu masters moved together, helping each other. Only then did they barely manage to keep their fire path immortal Gu intact. But now, he suddenly saw Feng Yuan flying towards them. He saw the group of non-phase hands behind Feng Yuan. Yi Luisang's heart almost stopped beating. Feng Yuan not only flew extremely fast, but also attacked quickly. Long-range attacks blocked the best escape route for Yi Luisang and the others, and greatly slowed down their speed. Next, Feng Yuan slightly changed his direction, bypassing them and continuing to fly. Yi Luisang and the others fled with all their might, but how could they make it in time? No! This unlucky Yi Lui tribe leader let out a mournful scream, as hundreds of non-phase hands filled his vision, becoming bigger and bigger. It was like a gust of wind blowing, or like a swarm of locusts passing through. The giant light blue hands continued to fly, not letting Feng Yuan go. As for Yi Luisang and the others, they blankly stayed on the spot. There were too many non-phase hands. In just a few breaths of time, all the goo worms on their bodies were captured. In the blink of an eye, they had become completely broke. Although there was still primeval essence left in their apertures, it was useless. How will I explain this to Lord Supreme Elder when I return? Yi Luisang's heart was filled with fear and bewilderment. The fire path immortal goo on him was specially lent to him by Yi Lui tribe's Supreme Elder, Yi Lui Lai. It was to help him become the Lord of the Imperial Court. The preciousness of immortal goo was self-evident. Yi Luisang lost the competition, and in order to protect his immortal goo, even though he was also a tribe leader of a super tribe, he could only endure the humiliation and side with He Lulan. Now, because of Feng Yuan's misdirection, the fire path immortal goo that he protected with all his heart was lost in the end. Feng Yuan flew all the way, and when he turned around, he saw that the number of non-phase hands behind him had decreased slightly, and was slightly happy. This was all Yi Luisang's contribution. Feng Yuan also saw the hope of getting rid of this group of non-phase hands. That was to divert the trouble to someone else. He had flying master attainment, but others did not. That is. While escaping, Feng Yuan finally found traces of Ma Hongyun. The Luck Path Supreme True Inheritance was enveloping Ma Hongyun and Zhao Lianyun, dodging and flying all over the place, with many non-phase hands chasing behind them. Of course, compared to the group behind Feng Yuan, they paled in comparison. Without any hesitation, Feng Yuan immediately flew towards Ma Hongyun. Sensing an even greater danger, the Luck Path True Inheritance's light lump instinctively changed its flying direction. But Feng Yuan chased relentlessly, and with extraordinary agility, he gradually got closer to the Luck Path True Inheritance. "Let us go, please let us go." Within the Luck Path True Inheritance, Ma Hongyun's pleading voice could be heard. "Don't come over, don't come over." Zhao Lianyun's delicate body was also trembling in fear. Feng Yuan's heart was like steel, how could he be shaken? His figure was like lightning. His speed suddenly increased as he flew past the Luck Path True Inheritance in a beautiful arc. The non-phase hands behind him were immediately attracted by the Luck Path True Inheritance's aura, and immediately flocked towards it. "We are finished." Ma and Zhao Lianyun's expressions were pale. They could only watch as hundreds of non-phase hands blocked their path and rushed over.